Land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of a Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, there is no supplementary agenda this evening, and we have two declarations of or disclosures of pecuniary interest. Both are by Councillor Solomon. The first one is 12A of the planning applications and also 12F of the planning applications. Moving on to the regular agenda, we have no deputations with regards to the one item on the council agenda, which is under community development.
With that, we'll move to community development then.
11A, Manic Gears and Differentials, Inc., offer to purchase.
Councillor Sakachi and Councillor Latimer, can I get you to move this, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
So seconded.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
Just waiting for one more, council. Okay, all votes are in. The vote passes 15-0. Next, we'll move on to planning services, and I'll pass it over to Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The process to be followed for each individual planning application will be as follows. 1. The clerk will announce each individual planning item. 2. The clerk will advise if any written submissions have been received regarding a planning item. If so, the clerk will read the written submissions that have been received. 3. For any items where a written submission is received, administration will proceed with the presentation. 4. Council will be asked if it has any questions of administration or the applicant if present. 5. Council will be asked what action it wishes to take with regard to the item. Notice: if any person or public body that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make a submission to the municipal clerk of the municipality before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal if otherwise eligible, unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as party to the appeal. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons who have made a request or who have made a submission regarding a particular planning item will receive a notice of council's decision, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk. Thank you.
Moving on to 12A, application for minor variance 1934446 Ontario Inc. and Fong Pham 519 Wallace Street, Community of Wallaceburg. Mr. Mayor, we have one pecuniary interest by Councillor Solomon. We've received no deputations and the applicant is not on the line.
Councillor Hall and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move this, please?
Yes, Mayor Kenneth, happy to move the recommendations.
And I will second.
Seeing no questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-0. Moving on to 12B, application for zoning bylaw amendment. Shama Estate, Inc., 174 Erie Street North, community of Wheatley, West Kent. We have one deputation this evening, and I will read it now. I am writing with concerns regarding the zoning change application for file D14 WH 8221S. This property backs up onto our property, and as such, the privacy and quiet we have enjoyed will come to an end if the property is cleared and built on. I am aware that housing is an issue in our area, but request that a privacy fence be part of the requirements to clear and build on that property. There are also many small animals living in the small bush area. Since the vet office was changed to apartments, the property now looks like an eyesore with all the junk around the building, which does not look good for our town, especially right next to the public school. Already, the current tenants are constantly disrupting the neighborhood with their fighting and yelling, with police being there several times since they moved in. I am concerned how much worse it will be with more people living there. Please take that into consideration when making your decision regarding this property. Thank you for your time. Laura Simpson, 154 Park Crescent, Wheatley. Mr. Mayor, the applicant is on the line, and that's all we have for this application.
Mr. Jacques, you want to do a brief presentation?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'll be inviting the Manager of Development and Planning Services, Anthony Jass, to make a brief presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. A zoning bylaw amendment application was received for the property located at 174 Erie Street North, the north end of the community of Wheatley. Property is located at the laneway entrance for the Wheatley Arena and Public School. The property is approximately 1.5 acres and contains a commercial building that formerly contained a veterinary clinic. The property is zoned commercial currently and is designated residential. Surrounding land uses around this property include institutional uses, light industrial towards the rear of the property, public park, and majority of the land use is residential. And also majority of lands surrounding the property are intended for residential uses. The zoning bylaw amendment application is proposing to rezone the property to permit the conversion of the existing commercial building to 3 residential units. The recommended the zoning for the property will be a low density residential. Will limit the uses to single detached, semi-detached, and duplex dwelling, but also to include the 3 residential units within the existing structure. The property will maintain its current servicing and access from Erie Street North. The submission indicated some concerns about the conversion for residential use for the property. This is from a property owner that abuts the property to the south. It will be this resident will be informed of the proper channels to submit certain complaints. The municipality does have bylaws to deal with issues related to property standards or any nuisance issues. And also the treat area towards the rear of the lot, it does exist, and I know that this property abuts that treat area. The intended use for this property is for the conversion of the existing building for the 3 residential uses or units. So it's not intended that any other alterations would be made at this time for the property. With that, the recommendation before council is to is to rezone the property to a site-specific low-density residential second zoning that again will permit the single detached, semi-detached duplex dwelling and the conversion existing structure into 3 residential units. Thank you, Mayor Canna.
Councillor Oche and Councillor Harrigan, can I get you to move this, please?
I'll move this.
And seconded.
Councillor Oche, a comment or question?
Yes, please. Sorry, to Mr. Jacques. This is one of the heaviest tree areas in the actual town limits. I'm surprised that we would recommend taking the trees down in this area. And that's just a comment. But the second thing is, and I've noticed this quite often lately, is that people are already working on things that do not have the proper site-specific, like this residential low-density zone, and they're already working on the commercial building, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, to make it into dwellings. How can this happen?
Brian Jocks, Director of Planning Services. In this instance, there was construction began on the conversion of this building without the necessary building permits issued by the municipality through Building Development Services Division. It came to the attention of the municipality that this was ongoing. The applicant then initiated the appropriate applications to amend the zoning, which would, if approved, permit the conversion of the building. If the zoning amendment is approved, the owner will be required to obtain all of the necessary permits through the normal building permitting process. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I just want to be correct. You, through you, Mr. Or Your Worship, Mr. Mayor. I believe you said he did not have the correct permits. And this isn't your department, I know, but why are people not being charged for this? It seems to be happening quite often. I know we've had the same with the residential area in Tilbury, actually putting in streets and sewers and everything else without permits. It seems to be happening quite a bit. We do not seem to be doing anything about it. I don't, and I'm not necessarily asking you, Mr. Jacques, as I know that's not your department, but maybe someone could let me know.
Thank you. This is something that I will ask Mr. Lucina, Director of Building Development Services, to respond to Councillor and the rest of Council. Thank you.
He's not here right now, is that correct?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, thank you, Ryan. I don't mean to be cranky. It's just, it seems like it's happening quite a bit, and I think something should be done about it because people are just doing what they want, which I don't believe is correct. Thank you, Your Worship.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-3. Moving on to 12C, application for zoning bylaw amendment 1413506 Ontario Limited, Yellow Bridge Crescent, Community of Wheatley, West Kent. We have not received any deputations and the applicant is on the line.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Oche, can I get you to move this, please?
Yes, Mayor Kenneth, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Happy to second.
Any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in and motion passes 16-0. Moving on to 12D, applications for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. David Nicholson, Middle Line, Communities of Raleigh and Merlin, South Kent. We do have the applicant's agent on the line, and we do have one letter of deputation. It is in support, so we'll have the clerk's office read it now. Go ahead, Meredith.
This deputation is from Kim Nicholson. This letter is in favor of the proposed bylaw amendment by David Nicholson. This property was originally purchased by William Nicholson and was approved that the front section could be lots, which he didn't sell. Not everyone wants to live in Chatham. A lot of people wish to live rural. Merlin has little to no lots available. I feel it deserves to grow as well as the other places. It is situated on the perfect area. David now owns this, and living in Merlin all his life, feels this is in the best interest of Merlin. Hopefully this will proceed. Thank you for reading. Kim Nicholson.
So, Mr. Mayor, because it was a one letter in support, I don't feel that we need to proceed with the presentation.
Agreed. With that, any questions? Hearing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0.
Actually, Judy, did I ask a mover and a seconder?
I was just going to put my hand up, Mayor Cannon.
Perhaps not. Go ahead.
No, you didn't.
Yes, so, yes, I realize that. Councillor Latimer and Councillor Thompson, can you move it and second it, please?
So moved.
And I will second.
All right, and let me guess, the vote's going to go well.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
12E, applications for official plan amendment, consent and minor variance. 2801920 Ontario Inc., baseline communities of Wallaceburg and Chatham Township. We have the agent on the line, and we have received 2 deputations, and we'll start with Kathy.
The first deputation is by Janice and Anthony Modi. We own the property 805 and 807. Our concern is that of privacy and safety, of which would be lost. We would like to propose that a fence be installed between our property line and the residential parcel that would be developed. Thank you. Janice and Anthony Modi.
And the second deputation is from Brenda Robinson, 7017 Baseline. I am strongly opposed to the building of apartments on Baseline in Wallaceburg. We have a city country area here, and what you're proposing to do will turn it into a busy residential area. Please leave us the peaceful area that we have. It is one of the reasons to live in this area. Thank you.
Mr. Jacques, we'll pass over to you for a brief presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The nature of the applications received is for the severance of a new parcel, approximately 5.4 acres in area, which is capable of supporting the future development of residential apartment buildings. In order to implement this severance and create this new property, an official plan amendment is required to adjust the land use planning policies to change the Wallaceburg urban boundary over the subject property and amend the corresponding residential and agricultural area land use designations within the property. The easterly frontage of the property along Baseline is currently within the Wallaceburg urban settlement area boundary. This is the area of the farm that historically was within the town of Wallaceburg limits. It is proposed through an official plan amendment to shift the urban designation and with it the urban development rights this property currently has toward the west side of the property along the properties abutting Murray Street to the west. The result of this will be the opportunity to sever a large parcel capable of developing into new high-density residential uses. With respect to the letters received, the first letter that was received from the property owners of 805 and 807 Murray Street. These properties are located just to the west of the subject property and currently contain one commercial building at 805 Murray Street, and 807 Murray Street consists of a car dealership property currently. As part of an eventual site plan application approval, a privacy fence would be a requirement at this location. The second letter writer lives across the road and north on Baseline in a property containing a residential dwelling. With respect to traffic concerns, in my opinion, this property is suitable for higher traffic generating uses, as Murray Street, which is also the Highway 40 connecting link, is the main thoroughfare north and south, and Baseline, which is a rural arterial road connecting to points east, such as Dresden, Thamesville, and the 401, are roads designed for higher volumes of traffic and are capable and suitable for high density residential development. With that, I have no further comments unless there's questions. It is recommended that official plan amendment application being official plan amendment number 68 be approved and the implementing bylaw be adopted, as well that consent application file B0722 to sever and convey a new residential parcel, approximately 2.2 hectares in area, be approved, subject to the conditions noted in the planning report. And it is also recommended, in order to implement that consent, that the zoning bylaw be given variances to allow the resulting 43-acre farm parcel and the resulting 5.4 acre parcel that's proposed to be severed. Thank you.
Councillor Hall and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move this, please?
Happy to move the recommendations, Mayor Caniff, and I have a couple of comments as well, please.
And I will second with some comments.
All right, Councillor Hall, then Councillor McGrail.
Thank you very much, Mayor Caniff. And thank you very much to Ryan Jacques for the report tonight, as well as to Ryan for addressing the concerns and some of the questions that were raised in the pair of deputations that were received this evening on this item. I'm looking forward to, and I'm confident that the public will be informed along the way throughout this process, as they are with all of our planning applications and projects. Specifically with this, in my view, it's an incredibly positive and exciting project for the community of Wallaceburg, something our community has not seen for many, many years. As a council throughout this term, we've seen the momentum of growth taking place in Chatham-Kent, and staff has been clear that this momentum is unprecedented and is expected to continue. So I know there is a strong demand for growth in Wallaceburg from the community, and I know that there's a strong interest and demand by developers and people to grow in Wallaceburg as well. So I believe this proposed project is a clear indication of that. And I'd like to thank the developer in this case for looking at Wallaceburg as a place to invest in. I believe really this is the first domino to fall in terms of sustained and needed growth in the community of Wallaceburg. And I look forward to more to come. So thank you, Mayor Kenneth.
Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So I just have one question as I was thinking through this. We have a lot of brown sites in Wallaceburg, and when I'm assuming we worked with this developer to find the site for them, was that presented to them like along the river? There's some, I would think, some very nice land that would be a really good spot for a building like this. So was that presented to the developer?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. As a course of regular business, municipal staff often review opportunities within all areas of Chatham-Kent for different types of development, including many properties within Wallaceburg. In the conclusion of those types of conversations, in this instance, this was a desirable property and an opportunity that had planning merit to move forward with. In general, I would like to advise council that it isn't just one residential or non-residential project that we are trying to attract to Chatham-Kent, and in this case, Wallaceburg in particular. One of the goals that I work toward, along with the planning staff, is to create opportunities for several development projects that would provide different types of housing, different tenures of housing in different locations within the community that could develop over time to provide that sustained growth that Chatham-Kent desires. So going back to the question, there are other properties that are reviewed on a regular basis. However, in this case, this was the desirable property for this particular project and this particular developer.
Okay, that's what I would like to know. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. Moving on to the final planning application, 12F, Application Zoning Bylaw Amendment 2833992 Ontario Inc. and 2718177 Ontario Inc. Fairview Line, Community of Harwich, South Kent. The applicant's agent is on the line, and we have received 2 deputations for this item, and we have a conflict by Councillor Solomon. Meredith?
So the first deputation is from Kim and Dawn Pigeon. On October 21st, 2021, residents lining Cameron Ave, East Lawn South, and Fairview Line, all surrounding the property identified as South Linwood Estates, received correspondence about a notice of completion application and public meeting to consider an application for zoning bylaw amendment. Following receipt of this notice, several residents took it upon themselves to educate the remaining residents of Linwood subdivision, including Glenmar, Joplin, Linwood, and East Lawn North, to receive and read and heard our letter of opposition, as well as over 50 other letters from over 100 residents in our neighborhood for the November 15th meeting. This information was shared and brought forth at our November 5th, 2021 outdoor meeting with councillors on Cameron Street. Some of the councillors made it known that they were unaware that the residents were not notified. One of the Fairview residents held the minutes of the final meeting, which supported that it was agreed not to notify the residents of the change from 33 to 61 homes in 2008 through the OMB. We are writing again to outline our concerns regarding not only this amendment of a zoning change to the required front yard depth from 11 meters to 8 meters. Most Linwood subdivisions have a quarter to a half acre frontage, but more importantly, around the increase of density of homes from the original proposal of 33 lots to now 61 lots. For the use of city lights and an additional exit onto Cameron Ave, which was not in the original proposal, and the use of any part of our Linwood subdivision name in the new subdivision title. The additional subdivision being developed has very little structure or parallels with any of the homes in our subdivision. While we appreciate the input and voices of councillors that supported us at our November 15th, 2021 meeting, and we do understand this has already been passed by the OMB, we stand firm in our conviction that our voices be heard. First, we believe the handling of this was neglectful. Since the OMB did not inform residents of the changes in their subdivision, it would only seem ethical and that someone be responsible to present this to the residents directly impacted by this. The initial proposal in 2006 was for 33 homes, and residents were presented with the option to purchase more land, extending their properties to support the 33 homes. While some did take advantage of this opportunity, the developer later changed his plans. We are aware that in 2007, there was a new proposal for 61 homes, which was turned down by City Council. Then in May 2008, the same proposal was then negotiated with the Ontario Municipal Board and approved. The damage is done. The bigger question is, what can we do now? We are hoping that you, as our councillors and the developer, will take our concerns under consideration. Secondly, this development is actually devaluating our homes and neighborhood. We've heard developers say, well, don't worry, your home will go up in value. Our subdivision is unique. There are only a few similar neighborhoods in our municipality. Those who want privacy, the feel of country 5 minutes from downtown, large lots, quiet, peaceful environments are certainly not going to have that with 61 new homes squeezed into a quarter-acre lots with streetlights and additional traffic of 120 cars. I can tell you that if I was the developer and knew I was stepping in on a very traditional, highly respected, mature, quiet neighborhood and I was creating upheaval like this, it would certainly weigh heavy on my conscience. The presenter for the developer on November 15th clearly stated, "We are going to build." We get that. We are hoping the developer is willing to recognize and take some of our input and concerns into consideration. I'm not sure what the compromise would look like. Again, we are not disputing the development. We knew that it was going to happen based on the large billboard with the plans of 30 lots displayed on the entrance of the proposed development on Fairview Line 12 years ago. When we purchased our home, we knew that one was in the making. Again, we also knew the value of this neighborhood, and we became more familiar with the value in the community of residents who make up our subdivision. Thirdly, the higher volume of traffic with 61 homes will be extremely disastrous and dangerous. That's 120 vehicles. Most homes have 2 vehicles running down Cameron, Fairview, and/or East Lawn. I would be concerned with the speed of traffic and the amount of traffic, the safety of parents strolling with their infants who's walking their dogs, the dozens of runners, walkers, and rollerbladers. What provisions are being made to accommodate the safety of our residents of Linwood? Is the builder going to absorb sidewalks? Or is the city going to pay for this, which ultimately would be us as taxpayers? Unfortunately, the development of 61 homes will dismiss the safety and beauty of our environment and roadways. Fourthly, the change in the front lot size, again, is completely opposite to Linwood's homes. I bet if I requested building an additional 40 feet of frontal addition to my home, that would not be passed. Those who reside in the newly proposed subdivision, with even the original 33 homes, we're still not even getting a quarter of the land that we have. So whether they build homes closer to the front, whether they build homes closer to the front isn't so much a concern as squeezing in that many homes with so little property. Those lot sizes are not consistent with the current existing homes of the Linwood subdivision. It's not even close to 30% of what most of our properties are. This is the unique curb appeal environment that Linwood has held for over 60 years. Our fifth concern is the increase in noise pollution. We understand that in the number 15 condition from the file on April 10th, 2008 reads that the subdivision agreement includes the planting of 1 tree per lot. Well, if each lot must have 1 tree, is there going to be any compensation for the noise for us? As present, we walk into our backyards. We are completely open from our perspective. We just see the field and 40 highway and have great privacy, which is what makes our area so sought after and appealing. Our concern is also with noise pollution. Would we require many evergreens planted out back as well as our neighbors? Also, is there any consideration being given for the ground and soil disruption that are huge 60-foot trees near the back of our property? I have had an arborist explain the damage and disruption that will likely be done to the 60-year-old tree roots and concern within 5 years we will likely lose all of our 60-year-old trees with root damage. And the file dated April 10th, 2008 reads that permanent fencing must be installed after construction is complete along the transmission corridor at the developer's expense. So there will be fencing around each lot for privacy. Most certainly, we are hoping there will also be some strategies in place to reduce the noise pollution, privacy, and protection of residents' homes. Our sixth concern is the disruption that the streetlights would have on the current existing subdivision homes. I believe the residents should have been informed of this. In essence, now for all of those directly impacted along Cameron, Linwood, East Lawn, and Fairview, we will see streetlights. People thrive on the country setting. When we look out back at our peaceful country setting, it'll be rather difficult to enjoy the tranquility of the night sky. I had no idea that the neighborhood you live in could be completely changed with persistent developers who want to appeal what our municipality has even opposed. If we wanted that perspective, we would have purchased more directly in the city. Again, we knew the development would happen behind us, but only as it was proposed on Fairview Line. Also, to add, due to the increase in traffic, it should be investigated to have stoplights at the end of East Lawn onto Park Ave, as this can be quite congested on the average day. Our seventh concern is regarding traffic leaving the subdivision that would be shining their headlights into the property of some of the current existing homes, and with regard to the safety of those walking, rollerblading, and strolling. If they added an additional exit, should this not have to have the approval of the city, and should we not have been advised of this? I believe the original plan only included the exit and entrance into and out of the subdivision from Fairview Line. Our eighth concern is using any part of Linwood or East Lawn name in the new subdivision. Now, if this was just going to be 30 homes, no streetlights, and only one exit, you would not be reading these letters of opposition. Linwood subdivision is peaceful, tranquil, and has almost a Rondo Park feel. The residents here are family. We have neighborhood summer gatherings and barbecues. We all look after each other. We respect the land and nature. To change the lot sizes and squeeze in as many homes as you can is far from what Linwood subdivision stands for. Using any part of our Linwood name is not appropriate. Linwood has a reputation in Chatham-Kent. There are only a few areas in Chatham now that are able to keep some history, intimacy, and quiet country, yet be so close to the city. Most lots are rather unique, of a half to 1 acre lots. They are proposing this expansion of homes on property that is directly behind us. That is all it is. We are understanding that squeezing in more lots and will equal more potential profit. But when the profit supersedes the concern of longtime generations of residents, it becomes our concern, because you are changing what the Linwood subdivision has stood for over 60 years. It jeopardizes the safety and tradition and unique appeal of this area. Our safety concerns, our dispute with regard to withholding of new amendments and how the information was not brought to our attention with regard to smaller lot sizes, changes from 33 to 61 homes, adding city lights, and an additional entry and exit, and directly opposite to other residents' driveways on Cameron, will directly affect the traffic and safety of the residents on East Lawn and Linwood and Cameron Ave. We, as current Linwood subdivision residents, are opposing the amendment as well as the above mentioned. We understand that it has already been passed. We are requesting that these concerns be addressed by your councillors and/or with the Ontario Land Tribunal to stop any development of the subject property known as South Linwood Estates until these concerns have been addressed and rectified. We are requesting that the link to the Chatham-Kent Electronic Council meeting be forwarded, as well as being notified in writing of the decision of the municipality of Chatham-Kent on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Kim and Don Pigeon.
The next deputation is by Ron Kent, living at 36 Joplin Road in Chatham. This letter of opposition is to the development on Fairview Line near Linwood subdivision. We are opposed to building small houses on tiny lots. We are opposed to bringing sewer lines to our subdivision. We don't need them. We are opposed to bringing streetlights to our subdivision. We are opposed to changing rural residential 1009 front yard depths from 11 meters to 8 meters. Building this type of development near our community will definitely increase crime rates. This is going to destroy our property values with this trailer park style development. What you are trying to do is to increase your property values using the name of our subdivision to pull the property values down low for our subdivision. The eyesore that you built in the Bloomfield and Park Ave, poorly constructed, low quality birdhouses on postage stamp lots. This is the blight that people see as they come to Chatham. Everyone that comes here complains about how horrible it looks. Now you want to bring blight to Linwood subdivision and slap our neighborhood name on it. This is just more greed that we experienced 20 years ago when we were forced to pay for the developer's water lines. No, we have not forgotten. Ron Kent.
Ryan, I can do a brief presentation, please.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Following my presentation on this application on November 15th, 2021, I do not have anything else to add at this time.
Councillor Latimer and Councillor Thompson, can I get you to move this, please?
Certainly to get it on the floor, I will move it.
I'll second it just to get it on the floor.
Okay. So Councillor Latimer, the floor is yours.
Thank you, through the mayor. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you again to all the residents of Linwood who have reached out and continue to communicate their concerns. But I would also like to publicly thank Tracy Pilon Abs, the principal planner for this project, because she indeed has responded to some of those initial concerns. The first one, namely, being that the name change. It is no longer known as South Linwood Estates. The name has been changed to Countryside Subdivision. And I just became aware of this this morning through conversation with Tracy. And I don't think that the municipality was even made known. It was made known to them much earlier than today either. The second thing is the residents also asked that the current signage for the former South Linwood Estate subdivision be removed. And Tracy did confirm that it was whitewashed, but I did relate to her that although the name was whitewashed, the visual of the prior plan for the subdivision is still there. So I've left it with her to take care of ideally getting rid of that signage. And because it is visually misleading to anyone going by or any of the residents that are still there. I also wanted to ask about the second or the updated traffic study that the municipality has asked for. Is Mark McTavish on that he could comment about the circumstances of why we're asking for the second study? Maybe, or Ryan could comment on that. And Mark could maybe comment on where we're at with the traffic study and what it would encompass. Namely to addressing some of the concerns that were outlined in the deputation tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, I can jump in. Mark McFadden here, Manager Engineering. So the request for the updated TIS was due to the fact that the original one was, I believe, completed in 2009. So it's outdated, and they need to take into consideration any development that's happened since. So as far as the TIS, the scope of it will take into consideration the intersections of Fairview and Highway 40, Fairview and East Lawn and Park Ave East and 40 Highway, and Cameron and East Lawn. So as far as the timing, I'm not exactly sure at this moment. I did reach out to the consultant today to have their traffic engineer contact us if they had any questions, but they would need to submit it and obtain our approval before anything can move forward.
Thank you, Mark. And so any recommendations that would come out of that updated traffic study would be brought forward at the time when this whole the development plan, the approval for it would come forward to us?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yes, so the TIS would, if it does recommend improvements to any of the intersections, typically that's accompanied by future growth as well. So it may not just mean this development would trigger it, but maybe future growth and future increased traffic could trigger that sort of thing. But what we would typically do in these instances is that any sort of improvement or upgrade required becomes a capital project. So it would have to be added to the capital projects list, and then it would be prioritized and funded accordingly.
So in other words, it could hold up this subdivision, or the subdivision would go in and we'd have to wait for the improvements.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. It wouldn't hold up the development of the subdivision. I guess if it was that urgent, that to the point that it needed to be completed in order for this development to take place. Typically, a TIS wouldn't indicate that. It may indicate that something is required once full build out is complete or full occupancy of the subdivision, which may take a couple of years. Yeah. But it wouldn't hold up the progress of the development.
Correct. And is there any public engagement or avenue whereby the residents could provide input into that traffic study, or any recommendations for what they feel should be needed to be done?
It's typically an engineer's report and an engineer's recommendation. So they're certifying the report. They're certifying the improvements that may be needed. It wouldn't typically include public consultation, I guess.
But certainly the public could comment on when it came forward for authorization or approval, correct?
It would be available for review, I guess, but a TIS is data driven. It's not based on public input, I guess.
Thank you for that clarification, Mark. I appreciate it. I also want to thank Tracy, the principal planner, for making it clear that she and the developers are open to working with the residents and the municipality to come to some resolution with regard to some longstanding sore points. And this particular recommendation or planning ask tonight doesn't have to do with a lot of those other things, but I wanted to say that that is in the works, and that Tracy and the developers are aware of the concerns of the residents, and that myself, and I'm sure Councillor Thompson and Sakachi are open, and certainly I am open and advocating on behalf of the residents to resolve some of these longstanding sore points amiably and to everyone's mutual agreement. So I think I'll leave it at that. Tonight, with regard to support of this request, I am going to tend to agree with my residents because I feel it's something that will not stop this development, which we can't do at this point. But it's a small point of I guess a give and take that we can do this evening, and for the residents to recognize that I am going to hold Tracy and the developers to their commitment to working with this neighborhood and us. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. In an effort to not be redundant, I think Councillor Latimer has kind of voiced some of my questions and concerns adequately in regards to the traffic study. And I really don't feel that what I do feel like I'd be adding was just kind of redundant. So I think that unfortunately I won't be able to support this, as I did hear that this is an issue that a lot of the residents have a concern with the setbacks. But do understand that this build is going to be going forward, and do appreciate the comments that Councillor Latimer said and working with the current residents. So that is all my comments, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor Bondi, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Excuse me. Yeah, I can't support this either. An old friend of mine, Mr. Bill Komsky, many years ago, when he told me that he had moved into Linwood, expressed to me, and I wasn't very familiar with Linwood. Obviously, I've driven by it, but maybe not in it so often, how it was really, country living in the city, as the cliche goes. And in the last 20 years, I've had the opportunity to drive through Linwood for different reasons, dropping my kids off at friends, etc. But other than that, I really don't have much of a reason to drive through Linwood, which I think is part of the beauty of Linwood, is that they don't have traffic. And when I have had the opportunity, particularly at night, to drive through this small, and I'll call it its own community, which is so incredibly close to the city, it really does have its own unique feel. And I think that this development will effectively alter that in a negative way. Might want to use the word destroy that feeling, but don't want to be too hard. But we all support development. Well, I think we all support development throughout the municipality, and we're seeing it in great numbers throughout many different parts of Chatham-Kent, particularly in the city of Chatham. And I think some things are, leave well enough alone. And this is a place that I think, is unique. It's idyllic to the people that live there. So I can't support, a permanent alteration of what these people have there. It's a quiet and at night very dark, in a nice way, place. And really, development comes with costs at all times. There's always going to be a little uncomfortable feeling with effectively almost any development. This is one that I think we can avoid. We've got a lot of land designated for residential development in Chatham, the city of, which of course Linwood's not in the actual city of Chatham, but in any event in the municipality. So this is one that I can't support. I just think it's a gem of a place, and I wish we would leave it alone. But obviously it's going to happen anyway, but I will use my little small voice to vote against it. Thank you very much, Mayor Canada.
Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions and comments. Just so everybody who's watching is clear, what happens if we vote no on this tonight? What are we actually voting on?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. This is Ryan Jocks, Director of Planning Services. The zoning bylaw amendment application that is under consideration at the moment is for a front yard setback reduction from 11 meters to 8 meters. So the front yard on a residential lot is the distance between the property line in the front of the house that separates the public road or right of way from the front wall of the building. So that reduction in 3 meters would have the effect of allowing the house obviously to be built a little closer to the street. It would allow, in some cases, a slightly larger house or a slightly larger backyard. If the zoning bylaw amendment was not successful and it was refused this evening, and the refusal was the final decision, then the subdivision would be able to proceed with the current regulation of 11-meter front yard setback instead of 8. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think it's important everybody around the horseshoe, the virtual horseshoe, as well as who's listening, understands what we're voting on tonight. It's a little frustrating going back through the past, looking at decisions of previous councils in regards to what they did or didn't decide to tell the residents of South Linwood. And that to me is one of the largest frustrations as a current councillor, knowing that this decision was really, for the most part, set in stone back in 2008. And there's very little we can do about it. I echo a lot of the concerns and comments from Councillors Sakachi and Latimer, as well as Councillor Bondi. I think about the community of Shrewsbury. And when you move to Shrewsbury, much like when you move to Cedar Springs, you recognize that you have a certain community feel of a lack of sidewalks, a lack of streetlights. And that's why you move to areas like this, because you're getting that feel. And I ask myself, what would the communities feel like if smack in the center of it, a community pops up that feels so very much different than the community that surrounds it? I think we've seen good instances and good examples of positive growth that we're going through in Wallaceburg and in other areas. And there's some wonderful growth in South Kent as well. But I look at this one and I think it's a good example of why we need to be careful on exactly how we grow and what that growth looks like. The South Linwood Estates, hard place to campaign in. Those driveways are long. And I think it would go a long way to settling a lot of the nerves if the community that's being built kind of in the center there looked a lot like the community that surrounds it, understanding that things change with streetlights and whatnot. But still, I really wish we could build a DeLorean and go back in time and change the decisions that were made, because I don't think in 2008 we'd take whatever development we could get. There's no bones about that. But I think we need to be careful. We need to decide as a community how we want to look going forward over the next few generations, and finding communities that fit well within themselves as they continue to grow. So for those reasons, I think I agree with Councillor Bondi and Sikachi, and I don't think I can support this tonight. It's a small step, but it would be one that would help at least that one minor issue make it feel more like a cohesive community. Thank you.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. My question was along the similar line, so I just wanted to clarify that the only thing we're voting on tonight is a 3-meter change to front yard allowance, right?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yes, that's correct. Councilor.
And I think maybe to summarize, that allows, as you said, a bigger backyard or a bigger home, seemingly probably increases the value of that property or what they could build on that property.
That's correct.
Okay. And I appreciate Councillor Thompson pointing out that if we didn't pass this tonight, the development still would be going on. It would be the same number of homes, same streetlights, same development that we've heard about before that was, approved way back before our time. Good. Yeah. And I think that, we've obviously, I think it's a good opportunity to have some of these conversations about what development looks like and what growth means. And certainly appreciate that there's a planning process that this goes through. There's master plans, and that a lot of this occurs a long time before we get to this point. And here tonight, we're just talking about a setback, which I think is really important to note. And I think when we have those conversations, even when they're about small things like this, and I've said it before many times, and I'll likely say it again, I'm sure, before the end of this term, that we should be careful when we use terms like fit in the community or consistent with the community, because while we might think we're talking about what buildings look like, sometimes we're talking about what types of homes are built, maybe not in this case, but in other cases. And it's important that when we think about the scarcity of housing and the price pressures in our community, there's going to be lots of different developments that may look different, and houses built today aren't the same as houses built in the 80s or 90s. People are looking for places to live, and there's a market out there that's creating those homes and creating jobs, and we need to make sure that we continue to strive to be a welcoming community. And sometimes that means accepting that there's going to be some small changes, and there's going to be people that look different in our communities and homes that look different, and communities can change, and that can be an improvement. Certainly, I think that there are going to be some people moving to those homes that are going to add value to our community and play a positive role in our community. So I think while this can be a rocky process to go through, there's always some positive, and I think seeing growth and seeing us addressing a shortage of housing is a positive step. Thank you.
With that, we'll see. I see no other questions. We'll put it to vote.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Foss had a question in the chat.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Councillor Foss.
Okay. I was on council at the time that was dealt with. At the time, a majority of council turned that application down. I just wanted to make that clear. And then the OMB at the time approved that application. I think, we've dealt with this long enough. I think it was taken out of our hands when it went to the OMB, and I think we need to move forward on this. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other questions now, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 10-5 and 1 abstained.
Okay, we'll move to non-agenda business. Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Bondi.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just a question, which I don't know if there's an answer for this because it's pretty fresh news, but with the news of the Ford government intending to drop the vaccine passport thing and the other restrictions being somewhat alleviated, including potentially the indoor masking thing by mid-March, I guess, was part of the announcement. And again, I'm not for, again, I'm just asking. As a municipality, we did pass a masking bylaw. And I know that the municipality has a vaccine protocol, if you will. So, and again, it's a question. If the province does in fact change these rules, does the municipality, do we rescind the bylaw? Do we change the municipality's vaccine policy, or how does that work? Like, I don't know if anybody's on the line for this one, because obviously it's just today's news, right? But I got 2 phone calls, which is more than I get on a lot of things, and people saying, so what does the municipality do? And I said, I don't know, but I will ask. So I am asking.
Someone got an answer? April?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I think Councillor Bondi, it's a great question that many of us will be wondering how we move forward with some of the announcements today. What I will say is that we always wait for the actual law to come out. Quite often, some of the public announcements and the media kind of take on things. Sometimes the details are written in the actual act. So once that does come out, then we will review it. We will look at it both from a public health perspective. Dr. Colby will review it. We will look at it as an administrative team and really make the best decisions that kind of for our community that we can make. But it really is, I agree with you, it's still too soon to be able to state kind of unequivocally what we will be doing. What I will say is that a number of meetings ago, I don't have it right in front of me. I believe it was Councillor Oche that brought a motion to council that was passed that looked at repealing our mask bylaw the day that the provincial mask bylaw was repealed. So that's already taken care of. What I will also say is that the government has indicated that masking is in all indoor places will remain. So even as March 1st, where a number of the other kind of public health measures will end, masking will not. They will continue to evaluate masking and they will update as appropriately while they watch what our COVID numbers are and how people are responding to that. So I'm not sure where you heard that masking was going to end. Right now, it is not. So I hope that helps, and we'll bring more information as we know more.
Thanks, April. Appreciate that. Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that this is National Kindness Week from February 13th to 19th, and on the 17th is Random Acts of Kindness Day. So if everyone could do their part, we'll make it a much nicer community.
Okay, we'll move to reading of the bylaws. First and second reading. Councillor Solomon and Councillor Pinsino, can each move that, please?
That's so moved.
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading. Councillor Foss and Councillor Bondi.
So moved, Your Worship.
And seconded.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, motion carried. We'll move to adjournment of council planning meeting. Councillor Latimer, and I'll get Councillor Crew to second that.
I'm flying by the seat of my pants here because I don't think I got anything from Meredith.
I can read it for you, Councillor Latimer, if you'd like.
Thank you, Judith. I appreciate that.
that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn till its next meeting to be held on Monday, March 7th, 2022, and that the Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
Second.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, if that's the end of the council meeting, we'll roll over to the Committee of the Whole meeting with Councillor Hall.
Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor Kenneth, and thank you, Judy. I will call the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole meeting to order for February 14th. To get things started, I'll hand it back over to Judy.
Thank you. We again will do the land acknowledgement to open our meeting. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional lands of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we as beneficiaries of the treaty must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Chair, there's no supplementary agenda, and I have not heard of any disclosures of pecuniary interest on the items to be discussed this evening.
Thank you, Judy. Moving along, if I could get a motion for the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on December 13th, 2021. Councillor Pinsino, can I get you to move that? And Councillor Wright, second.
I'll move them.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none. Anybody opposed? Seeing none. Moving on. Judy, I'll pass it back over to you for deputations.
Thank you. This evening, Council, we have 11 deputations that were received with regards to the Committee of the Whole items for discussion. And so the Clerk's Office will begin to read them now. The first one is from the late Harry Lawson. Mayor Caniff, members of Council, staff, and residents of Chatham-Kent. When talking to Council members and staff, there is no urban-rural divide. We just take a look at Chatham-Kent Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy. Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority and the farming community fulfilled their obligations. They are continuing to move forward with planting trees, prairie grasses, and new wetlands. Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority is collecting the data as a research collaborator. Because Council and staff did not follow through on their own plans, agricultural cannot be forced to accept blame for the Chatham-Kent Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy being called a failure. You did not follow your own written submissions. The 2 online surveys that were held follow the law as a legal consultation. The questions were skewed to your desired outcome. Agriculture has no real input. This is prostitution by paying for a hired survey for the results you wanted. For the rural-urban divide, you have driven a permanent stake in the ground. To this end, for statistical facts, 98% of Chatham-Kent residents are forcing their non-science ambitions on less than 2% of Chatham-Kent's rural residents. This 2% owns 90% of Chatham-Kent's land base that they pay taxes on. Chatham-Kent grows to feed the world. This is how we derive our income to support Chatham-Kent businesses, schools, our families, and our way of life. According to Ontario Federation of Agriculture data in 2019, Ontario was losing 175 acres of farmland a day to the urban sprawl. Urban development is always exempt. We need a mediator such as Brian Boyle. This was done in the original Chatham-Kent Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy. We need to be impartial when collecting all information, science-based or not, from both sides because we have not been allowed to present our agricultural science-based facts. We are the best stewards of our land. Through science and the use of new technologies, agricultural production has increased more than threefold in the last 50 years. We are using less fertilizers, chemicals, and insecticides today than in the past. We do not need to reinvent the wheel. Please go back to an unbiased mind and review the current Chatham-Kent Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy. Let's continue on. Let's not use taxpayer monies that are not in the current budget before we honestly review the pros and cons of where we have been and where we need to go. We need open consultation from all sides. Respectfully submitted by Louis Rush, Director of the Ontario Federation of Agriculture Zone 1 on Harry Lawson's behalf.
The next deputation is from Ron Varel. I am writing this deputation to voice my concern with the current temporary tree cutting bylaw and to offer the Committee of the Whole some possible solutions with a view to ending both the bylaw and the conflict it has generated as soon as possible. Number one, as a property owner, I would like to see an agricultural advisory committee to advise council on issues involving agriculture in Chatham-Kent. A good example of an issue that this committee could deal with would be the temporary tree cutting bylaw currently in place. Issues such as this, as well as other issues, could be effectively addressed, and we could provide meaningful information to all parties as to how we in agriculture operate our business of feeding the world. Number two, I would like to know why council would not just keep the natural heritage implementation strategy that was established in 2014. From the perspective of the agriculture and the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, it is working well. With the new mandate, it could still be a useful platform for all concerned. It is also paid for. The Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority also has told all concerned that this strategy is a success. Since the landowners control 91% of the land base and have generally accepted the strategy, it would be a great way for us to continue to work with our local conservation authorities. I would like to thank Council for trying to find a workable solution to this issue and for the opportunity to present some additional solutions. I am sure as a property owner, we can work together to make Chatham-Kent an even better place to live in. Thank you, Ron Varel.
The next deputation is by Mary Constancio. Dear Mayor and members of Council, the goal of this deputation is to make a case for Chatham-Kent to impose climate change measures, beginning with the implementation of a clear-cutting bylaw. I'm aware that even though a temporary bylaw has been in place for nearly a year now, clear-cutting is still happening. I can't express to you enough how upsetting this is when we all know the tremendous benefits of trees, particularly forests. Let me remind you of a few: clean air, support stormwater and watershed management, stabilize soil, create healthy and beautiful communities, and so much more. While many municipalities already have a bylaw in place and have committed 40% canopy targets, why are we continuing to see a decrease of tree coverage in CK? Our community is and will continue to suffer if we don't commit to improving our environment. So councillors, I'm pleading with you to be stewards of our community and agree to a clear-cutting bylaw with inspectors and permits so trees can be saved in a timely manner. And sincere thank you for your work and consideration. Mary Constancio, a caring citizen.
The next deputation is on behalf of Ron Faubert, Committee Chair, Woodlot Issues and the Natural Heritage Strategy, Kent Federation of Agriculture. Mayor Caniff and members of Chatham-Kent Council, I am Ron Faubert, Executive Member of the Kent Federation of Agriculture and Chair of the KFA Woodlot Issues and the Natural Heritage Strategy Committee. The KFA represents well over 1,800 primary producers and agribusiness members in Chatham-Kent. Our primary focus is a strong and sustainable agricultural sector. Our success is evident as agriculture remains this municipality's largest economic driver. 67% of our Chatham-Kent tax base is our rural property owners. Property owners want to make it clear that there is the need for additional engagement on the woodlot bylaw issues. The Woodlot Preservation Motion Report to Council on August 5th, 2021 clearly stated that the municipality would launch a full public consultation process with interested parties. It also stated the responsibilities of the Natural Heritage Advisory Committee of Council would include undertaking a detailed review of the comments and input received as part of this engagement process, considering the needs for additional information gathering and engagement. So far, public consultation only involved a flawed survey that many landowners and groups perceived as pro-bylaw, with no opportunity for affected landowners' comments and concerns. So when will the full public consultation process with the interested parties take place? It's time the Natural Heritage Advisory Committee of Council committee walks the walk and fulfills their commitments to affected property owners. The consultation process used in 2013 was very effective and should be replicated by the Natural Heritage Advisory Committee of Council. The KFA has shared this process with municipal staff to review and has offered to assist in its implementation. Staff have indicated this direction must come from the Natural Heritage Committee of Council before it can be implemented. Lack of agreement upon the definition of social balance between environmental sustainability and benefit to the community of the whole is the crux of our current community divide. You must make the review of the Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy transparent with a complete consultation process. Thank you, Ron Faubert.
The next deputation is from Jim Brackett. I am Jim Brackett, a farmer and member of the Chatham-Kent property owners. One of my issues is the lack of real consultation with the farmers who own the land that this temporary bylaw affects the most. We need input to try and help find solutions. We have recently filled out the survey on climate change, but after many attempts cannot access the results. I have contacted the Othello group and have been told that it's not their fault, but to take it up with CK staff. So far, no response. We need solutions. We would like to help with that. I talked with a counselor and liked the idea that they had of moving meetings of council to a venue like the Bradley Center, where the public can engage with staff and council and still social distance and stay safe. Maybe that would help all parties engage successfully. Respectfully, Jim Brackett.
The next deputation is by Sherry Prowse. I would like to address the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole on February 14th in relation to item 10 on the agenda, deliberations on privately owned woodlots. The presentation indicates, as the required information has been received, that the committee is now in the phase of deliberating on a way forward. The presentation outlines 4 key decisions that the committee will make to come to its final recommendation to council. I would like to address step number 1, departure from status quo, and step number 2, regulation, and the associated step number 3. Step number 1 is the departure from status quo desired. If the decision will be based on the effectiveness of the status quo in preserving woodlands, the answer would be yes. It is clear by the mapping project of forest cover and natural heritage features report, there has been a substantial decline of forested lands between 2015 and 2020, a time where the natural heritage implementation strategy was the only means to discourage tree cutting. This amounts to 161.5 hectares, almost 400 football fields worth of forested areas lost. It is clear the status quo was not effective at preserving woodlands. If the decision will be based on the desire to follow the will of the people, the answer will again be yes. A recent municipal survey on woodland preservation demonstrated that most respondents, over 70%, supported the preservation of woodlots in Chatham-Kent. It would not be acceptable for council to enact policies to appease a minority of the property owners in Chatham-Kent despite the majority's concerns. Step number 2, regulation. The municipal survey also showed that most respondents voted in favor of educational programs, incentives, and regulations in supporting healthy forests. I do support education and reasonable incentives, but I would like to speak more specifically to regulations and how they would be drafted. Regulations have to be supported by clear policy objective and precedents, as well as reflect community values and standards. A bylaw is an effective tool for this, but it should be consistent with Chatham-Kent's official plan, which in turn must be consistent with the 2020 provincial policy statements. Forested areas should be considered natural heritage systems and not just stands of trees referred to as woodland or woodlot in the current temporary bylaw. It is important to keep in mind that the PPS is the minimum standards, but municipalities are encouraged to go beyond them. According to the 2020 PPS, among other things, natural heritage systems support natural processes, which are necessary to maintain biological and geological diversity, natural functions, viable populations of indigenous species, and ecosystems. Stage number 3. As part of the bylaw process, a robust and transparent permitting system must be in place, and anyone who is considering tree cutting should be required to follow an application and approval process. Once granted, the permit should be publicly accessible so that people of Chatham-Kent are informed of the approval of this work. It is recommended that a notice of this work be placed online and in local papers as appropriate. The Raging Grannies of Chatham-Kent demonstrated this to be a crucial part of the process when they bore witness to the cutting on Zone 2 Road and Botany Line properties in January of this year. While inspections were apparently ongoing, the cutting continued, and citizens could not be ensured that the bylaw was being followed. Dedicated inspectors, as with building permits, for example, should attend properties immediately to investigate possible infractions in response to credible reports. In addition, for permitted and unpermitted cutting, where an inspector is satisfied that a contravention of this bylaw has occurred, the officer may implement a stop work order to stop the injuring or destruction of trees. This is a crucial step in the process, as it only takes a few hours to destroy a mature forest that took generations to mature. Finally, penalties such as fines or jail time must be large enough to be effective as a deterrent. In some situations, the cost of the penalty may be offset by long-term profit gains resulting from the clearing. In closing, the status quo should not prevail. An effective regulation scheme requires effective policy and official plan support, bylaws, dedicated inspectors with powers of entry and stop work order, and severe enough penalties to deter woodland destruction. Thank you, Sherry Prowse.
The next deputation is from Eric Prelaz. To Mayor Caniff and members of council, my name is Eric Prelaz, and I am a property owner and farmer in the Kent Bridge area. I am actively involved in our community as a member of several agricultural-related organizations and committees throughout Chatham-Kent. I am addressing you today as I feel that there have been a serious lack of communication and consultation between the municipality and its property owners. I've waited for the opportunity originally promised by you to allow rural property owners to speak and provide data on the matter of the tree cutting bylaw, and yet you have not yet provided the appropriate opportunity for landowners to do so. I am concerned about the voice that is carrying this issue. I believe that the voice of the agricultural sector, who owns 91% of the land in Chatham-Kent, should carry the most weight behind this issue, and that they should be properly consulted. After all, these members of your community own their land, pay taxes on their land, and truly have proven to be the best stewards of their land. I cannot say that I am anything other than disappointed in the process for public consultation that has not yet been provided by this municipality. I do not consider the flawed surveys any sort of consultation. These surveys were skewed and led towards a pre-generated results with no opportunity for comments. The survey system was also open to everyone, which meant anyone from outside of the municipality could respond. Today, I'm asking you to provide the landowners in Chatham-Kent with a proper public consultation process, which you had proposed in the motion on August 5th, 2021. This will provide you with the opportunity to hear from the landowners who will be most affected by the final results of this bylaw. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your votes on this matter. Concerned landowner, Eric Prelaz.
The next deputation is from Bill Parks. I am Bill Parks, a member of the CK Property Owners. Please hear and read my deputation to the Natural Committee of the Whole. Chatham-Kent has about 2,000 farm property owners who own over 90% of Chatham-Kent land. CK property owners must be consulted. The Othello surveys do little to address the CK farm property owners' needs. CK property owners seek solutions for all CK citizens and council to move wisely through the current woodlot issue. CK property owners support the Natural Heritage Strategy as adopted in 2014 for Chatham-Kent. CK property owners support the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority teaching, demonstrations, and conservation work. The Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority has helped all Chatham-Kent citizens plant trees, tall grass prairie, and wetlands. CK property owners believe an unbiased arbitrator will work with all and could achieve an excellent woodlot solution. We would welcome the opportunity for CK property owners to review and revisit the Natural Heritage Strategy with CK Council. Yours very truly, Bill Parks, CK property owner.
Next deputation is by Phil and Anne Lenoir. We are residents of Chatham-Kent, south of Highgate in Ward 3. Previously, we both worked for the Grand River Conservation Authority and acquired knowledge and understanding of farm best management practices and how forest cover and natural heritage interacts with agriculture. We would like to submit to Council, specifically the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole meeting on February 14th, these comments. Addressing item 8, existing woodlot incentive programs. The report is entirely accurate in terms of government incentive programs, but we think it useful to point out that there are other incentives to maintaining woodlots. Specifically, there are carbon credit programs available globally. Additionally, woodlot owners can derive income from woodlots by appropriate management and harvesting. Any attempt to educate landowners on the benefits of establishing and maintaining woodlots should include these two factors. Item 10, deliberations on privately owned woodlots. We have the following observations on this presentation and how it will impact council decisions going forward. Slide 5, it is claimed that this matter is characterized by complexity. While there is local controversy over legislation to prevent clear cutting, we would suggest that this matter is quite simple. The role of forests in healthy watersheds, in the mental wellness of our communities, and sustainable agricultural practices cannot be denied. More significantly, their role in carbon sequestration and mitigating the effects of climate change are paramount. It is widely accepted that climate change is already causing loss of life, and unchecked, the loss of life will be unimaginable. So, at some level, our failure to maintain forest cover in Chatham-Kent is responsible for loss of life. This stark fact alone makes the retention of our existing established forest cover quite simply a responsibility that we must embrace. Slide 7. It is our responsibility to depart from the status quo. Instead of Chatham-Kent occupying a leadership role in the province of Ontario, we have severely lagged in our responsibilities on climate change. Our neighboring counties all have greater forest cover while maintaining their agriculture. To maintain the status quo would simply be unethical. The three tools listed each have their role in meeting this responsibility. No one of them by itself will likely be enough. Incentives clearly have a place. It would not be fair to place the onus for retaining our forests on farmers who must derive a living from the land they control. However, farmers must share in the responsibility, so incentives must not become a boondoggle and a millstone around the neck of CK taxpayers, allowing landowners to avoid their role as environmental stewards. Regulation has to be the strongest tool and key in preserving our remnant forest cover. To replace the ecological function of any established forest would require new planting orders of magnitude greater in area, at least for many decades. After all, any landowner that is in the possession of established forests has not enjoyed income from farming these areas. Retention of the forest cover does not equate to a loss of income. It is fair to regulate to prevent this loss in the same way that we legislate against other destructive practices. A permit process has to be the most effective and transparent way of ensuring compliance and avoiding misunderstandings. Legislation must have teeth. The penalties must be sufficient to make harm or destruction of forest uneconomic. A fine for clear-cutting 100 acres of forest must be greater than a fine for clear-cutting 5. A requirement to replant a cleared area with ongoing fines for noncompliance must be an effective deterrent to clear-cutting. In conclusion, we would like to congratulate members of this committee and council that have supported bringing CK into line with other municipalities in Ontario that protect their forests. We say shame to those members that have resisted and abrogated their collective responsibility to our community. We urge council to move towards permanent and effective protection of our forest cover. Phil and Anne Lenoir.
The next deputation is from W.T. Young, Sydenham-Field Naturalist Conservation Chair. Honorable Mayor and Chatham-Kent Council. For those not familiar with our organization, the Sydenham-Field Naturalists have been a significant voice for nature for almost 4 decades. We have well-established and collaborative relationships with many local, provincial, and federal organizations seeking to preserve and enhance our natural infrastructure. In the spring of 2021, the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole was established to gather information and guide council's decision-making around the issue of deforestation and proper management of forested areas in Chatham-Kent. As our executive feels the current trend of forest loss in Chatham-Kent is not sustainable, we are hopeful that the outcome of these deliberations will lead to permanent and enforceable protections for our remaining Carolinian forests. In order to support that outcome, Council has various tools at its disposal, and Sydenham Field Naturalist would encourage a combined approach of education, incentives, and regulations to achieve a proper balance that is fair and equitable to all. Unfortunately, this is not the first time our community has grappled with this issue. In 2013-14, the Natural Heritage Implementation Strategy was drafted to address forest cover loss. Following the recent arterial photograph analysis conducted by the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, it is clear that the NHIS has been largely unsuccessful in halting or reversing the destruction of woodlots. In December 13, 2021, Planning Services report titled 2021 Woodlot Public Engagement Survey and Analysis of Survey Results. It is noted that a combination of education, incentives, and/or regulatory instruments might be the optimal approach based on their ability to complement one another. If applied without a complementary bylaw, the education and/or incentive approaches are unlikely to be successful in outweighing the many factors that have contributed to forest loss in Chatham-Kent over the decades. A combined approach featuring education about the importance of preservation of these natural features, incentives for stewards of the land who are adhering to the well-established management practices, and enforcement of a well-structured bylaw that restricts the removal of irreplaceable natural communities is what is needed for Chatham-Kent. Sydenham Field Naturalists would be happy to collaborate with the municipality or other local organizations on any aspects of a plan to halt forest loss. We are hopeful that with the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole will recommend an approach that finally addresses the long-standing issue. Sincerely, W.T. Young.
And our final deputation tonight is from John Serapnicus. There are a number of common services and benefits that society accepts and appreciates. Many of these are local and/or regional. A partial list includes policy and safety, fire departments, health services, maintenance of roads, drainage, social support, and education, to name a few of the more prominent shared responsibilities. All taxpayers contribute to these important services, whether they directly benefit from them or not. People realize these as important to the community as a whole, and everyone, 100%, sharing of the burden to fund these programs is accepted. By declaring a climate emergency, Chatham-Kent has added this to the list of responsibilities for the county. If we accept that it is an emergency for all of us, as with other just mentioned supports, it's logical that everyone in the community, all 100%, not just 2%, should contribute to the protecting of the environment. Just as you cannot justify a small percentage of the population shouldering the burden for education, health, or policing, it logically and morally would be wrong to target and single out a hardworking, risk-taking, and productive sector of our economy. At the very least, a resolution to this issue must include a shared participation and responsibility. The most just and universally accepted vehicle to address this issue is to embrace the Natural Heritage Strategy and make sure all stakeholders generally work within this framework and not try and sabotage it. It will work for all if we want it to work. Initiatives that are well-intentioned and can easily have unexpected or unwanted consequences. Over the years, more and more regulations and restrictions have pushed businesses and investments out of the county, and to the point that every population was decreasing at times. The agricultural community has not been immune to this and is working hard in a highly regulated environment. Unfortunately, the farming sector is getting fatigued with the constant negative narrative from a few interest groups and those who refuse to give us a place at the planning table. Please remember that agriculture, through thick and thin, good times and bad, consistently supports hundreds of regulated businesses and jobs in the community. First and foremost, Kent County was made for agriculture. Other regions and counties, not so much in some areas, are better suited to forests entirely. The real climate emergency is piling on more and more restrictions and regulations. To think about it for a minute, look around you. Look at what is on your feet, your appliances at home, and other items in your daily lives. Instead of these items being made under our scrutiny, they are imported from more places with fewer or no environmental oversight, with the result that the air we breathe is more polluted and probably got here even before we bought these items. This is the real climate emergency. The more we burden ourselves, the more pollution we cause. The county needs to remain friendly to agriculture because aside from it being our economic backbone, we can at least be more comfortable that we can produce and eat. What we produce and eat is safe. As one example, we should all welcome greenhouses, where produce is grown with minimal pesticides and low E. coli risks, at the same time providing jobs and economic support to the county. Chatham-Kent is and should remain an agricultural powerhouse where we can feed ourselves and many beyond our borders. There are many environmental and non-environmental groups willing to work and provide grants to accelerate the canopy cover of our county. The Natural Heritage Strategy is the best way to invite and engage 100% of our population without alienating or disproportionately targeting minorities, at the same time sending the message that agriculture is appreciated and welcomed in the county. Even without everyone honestly willing to make the Natural Heritage Strategy work in the past, the statistics for reclamation are impressive and encouraging and demonstrate that if everyone sincerely embraced the initiative, accelerated success is assured. You are potentially asking some of us who have placed our life savings into our properties to shoulder the burden for the entire county. You are asking me personally to offer up 90 acres of forest. What's in your wallet? Sincerely, John Serapnicus.
Thank you very much, Meredith and Judy and Kathy, for reading the deputations on behalf of our community members. And thank you to everyone that submitted a deputation this evening as well. We've appreciated all of them throughout the process since this committee's been established. So moving along in our agenda, going on to item number 7, it's an information report, but draft forest cover change map viewer. So I don't need a motion to put it on the floor since it's an information report, but I will open it up to questions for anyone that has questions on the report. If you want to just raise your hand. Not seeing any questions. Last chance for questions on this report. Seeing none, okay, we'll move on to item number 8, which is existing woodlot incentive programs. Once again, this is another information report, so I don't need a motion. Open it up to questions, and I'll start with Councillor Harrigan.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions on this report, but I did want to thank staff. It was I who at our last committee meeting had asked for all of the incentive programs in one place. So I find that this is incredibly helpful to see the incentive programs that are available for the different sizes and different types of forestry that's managed within Chatham-Kent. So just wanted to say kudos and thanks to staff for providing this information to us.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I just have one question, and that question is to staff. Is there somebody on staff that can help a landowner if they choose to apply for any of these programs outside of the municipality? Because sometimes governmental programs are a little harder to navigate. So is there somebody available to help landowners apply for these programs?
Bruce or Ryan, do you think you might be able to take that question?
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I couldn't get off mute there for a second. Thank you for the question. So the short answer is yes. Certainly municipal staff want to be of assistance to any landowner who'd want to take advantage of these programs. Admittedly, that in the past, we don't have an assigned person to do that, as this issue and this information and acknowledgement of it has emerged, relatively recently, but I'm definitely not going to reject the offer to assist our residents. So as to who that might be, I think at the very least for the interim, please direct people to the planning department, and we can work with our tax department as appropriate, or our peers at the Conservation Authority, and hopefully or potentially as this evolves, so we have a more defined process for providing this assistance. Thank you.
Great, that was my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrail. Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Pinsino, Latimer, and Wright. Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, maybe to Ryan or Bruce. It's just a simple answer, I guess, if you can provide it. Is any of the incentive programs that is listed, is any of the numbers for like the minimum, is there any opportunity to lower that, or are these all set by the different, basically the different legislations that are there? Does Chatham-Kent have the ability to lower any of those by chance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we do not. They're either managed through a provincial ministry or through MPAC directly.
Perfect. That was my thought, Ryan. I just wanted to just double check to ensure that we did not have that ability. Thank you. That's all questions I have.
Thank you, Councillor Sakachi. Councillor Pinsino.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chairman. The reality is you need more than just a tax break as an incentive. You need a real incentive that, brings some financial benefit to the landowners. As the one deputation said, they've got their life savings into a lot of these places, and all of them, it's their living. You can't expect the ag community to take all the burden of this. And I think we have fast-tracked this. I don't think we've had the proper consultation with the landowners. I don't think we've had them involved enough to really even consider a bylaw at this point in time anyway. And depending on what route you go, but we really do need to look at some sort of an incentive that is going to be beneficial. It's not going to break the bank, but it's going to give the landowners some incentive to keep their bush standing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinsino. Councillor Latimer, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if there's what the uptake is. Do we have any idea what the uptake is for any of these programs in numbers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Latimer, I don't believe that's information we have at the ready currently.
Because I just wondered, a lot of the programs and a lot of landowners, they choose not to use these programs because of the associated, sometimes it's perception, sometimes it's real, that the provincial government has call over what they do with their woodlot. And so I think we have to be careful there. But I would like to, can we get the numbers? Because I really don't know what the numbers would be that actually use these programs.
Mm-hmm. It appears Mr. Gord Quinton, our Chief Financial Officer, may have a comment with regard to that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Gord.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to note that the Farm Forestry Exemption Program that's administered through MPAC is an automatic thing. So up to 20 acres per owner, and keep in mind many farm families, different farms are owned by different people in the family, or husband owns one farm, wife owns another farm, but by owner, 20 acres. For 2021 it was 20 acres. In the 2021 fall economic statement, the province increased that to 38 acres per owner. That's now exempt from taxation. So that's the most significant one program that's out there. Applies to everyone automatically with no application involved.
Thanks for that clarification, Gord. I actually was talking about the other ones, but because I don't have a real idea of if there is an uptake, and if there is, that's great. If there isn't, why isn't there? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Leonard. Bruce McAllister, you had an additional comment?
Oh, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I had my hand up, but I just wanted to add that I don't have it right at the ready, but I know in the Conservation Authority's report, there was some stats there with regard to, the uptake in the ALICE program, for instance, and I'm sure we can find that here, fairly quickly as well.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Councillor Wright. Oh, Councillor Wright, are you still there? Yeah. Do you still have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I'm computer tonight. Yes, my concerns with the Senate programs, they're 20 acres is $1,000 incentive program. But a young farmer today buying a farm at 200 acres with 20 acres of bush is costing them approximately $4 million. The interest on that at 4% is $16,000. The $1,000 return on a $16,000 interest still is not a good incentive program. And he still has to apply for it and move forward on it. And me being a woodlot owner of 50 acres, I can't get an incentive because I'm not a farmer. Like your incentive programs are not working the way it's set up now. We need different incentive programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And I'm sure that's something that, we haven't got to Gabriel's presentation yet, but I know that looking at incentives is something that this committee and council can consider. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that later on this evening. So thank you, Councillor Wright. Seeing no other questions, last call.
Mr. Chair, I put my question into the chat.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead, Councillor Foss.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, have we looked at the carbon credit program, and does anyone know how that might work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not. I'll ask Gabriel Clark, Manager of Growth and Sustainability, if he has any knowledge of those programs and if he has anything to add.
Thank you, Ryan. Through the councillor and or through the chair and to the councillor, I've looked at them in the last few years. For this report, I was really focused on the existing provincial incentive programs and those that are available through our conservation authority. But I can take a look at, review that particular issue and get back to the committee with any additional information as to what might be available through any existing carbon credit programs to our owners of woodlots in Chatham-Kent.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think it's an important item to look at. If there's any way that we can gain some incentives through that program, I think would be worth the look anyway. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. I'm going to check the chat. Okay, seeing no other questions. Last call for questions. Seeing none. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 9, future meeting dates. So we do have a staff recommendation for a number of upcoming dates. So if I get a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Crew moved and seconded by Councillor Latimer.
I'll move that.
I will second it, but I have a comment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we'll open up to questions and I'll start with you, Councillor Latimer.
I just have a concern with our meetings heading into the spring because our main stakeholders, again, are not available in mid-April going on. to the seeding and the maintenance, and then the harvesting months. So May 16th, this is for it to be our final meeting. I that was brought to my attention, and I agree. That is going to be an issue.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. Any further questions to this item? Oops. Okay, seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
For a couple more votes, Council. Okay, all votes are in. Motion passes 9-5.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you to the committee. Moving on to item number 10, deliberations on privately owned woodlots. And I believe we have a presentation coming up, and I will pass it over to Ryan Jacques, first of all, the Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In a moment, I will introduce Mr. Gabriel Clark, the Manager of Growth and Sustainability within the Planning Services Division. Gabriel will be making a presentation with regard to this item. I'll just highlight a couple of things now coming out of that presentation that I think are important. The presentation does acknowledge that up until this point, the first 3 committee meetings, the committee has received much information. This presentation moves on and proposes what it would be a representation of how this issue can proceed through a series of decisions with the intent that a recommendation from this committee can eventually be made to Municipal Council. The represented sequence of decisions starts with the more general questions surrounding this issue, and it then leads to those that are more specific. It is important to note that the decision points to be presented in this presentation do align with the questions posed to the community through the 2021 consultation. So for each step of the proposed decision-making tree, there are corresponding inputs from the community. There are potential for some decisions to be made tonight by this committee. The effect that these decisions would have as far as providing direction to municipal staff would be that these decisions would inform the content of reports to come at future meetings, including the next meeting to be held on March 21st. At the conclusion of the presentation, there is an opportunity for questions from the committee, which we'll take at that time. So at this point, I would like to turn it over to Gabriel Clark to proceed with the presentation. Thanks, Gabriel.
Thank you, Ryan. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the overview of the presentation, which I'll bring up right now, essentially has 2 parts. So in the first part of the presentation, I will review some of the background that has brought the committee to this point on the issue of privately owned woodlots. Then I will describe the sequence of decisions that has been prepared to assist the committee with deliberations on this matter. In the second part, as Ryan mentioned, I will turn the floor back over to the chair of the committee to begin deliberations on the first 2 steps of the sequence of decisions that I will go over in the following slides. There we go. So just a bit of background. This presentation and the sequence of decisions in the decision tree contained herein were prepared in line with previous presentations and reports provided to the committee, along with the committee's discussions at the last Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole meeting on December 13th, where the committee signaled a desire for administration to prepare a starting point for initiating deliberations on the issue of privately owned woodlots for this meeting today. There we go. So over the course of 2020 and 2021, administration have provided council and this committee with a body of information on trees and woodlot preservation. This information gathering effort was guided by council's information requests contained in a series of motions related to trees and woodlots passed between 2019 and now. This information is summarized in the report called Summary of Tree and Woodlot Related Information presented between 2020 and 2021 that can be referred to in our December 13th committee meeting agenda. At this point, all existing information gathering requests made by council to date have been fulfilled. And unless further information gathering efforts are identified by the committee at this stage, the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole might be considered as pivoting from a phase focused on receiving information on trees and woodlots to one focused on deliberating a way forward. Notwithstanding this pivot, it should be noted that additional information needs may become apparent as deliberations proceed, and that administration stand ready to gather any additional information that the committee might deem to be valuable in its deliberations going forward. So throughout this most recent community discussion on woodlots located on private properties, the issue has once again reverberated throughout the community. The issue is characterized by complexity, which is due in part to the diversity of views present in the community, the existence of a multitude of factors, competing pressures, potential courses of action, the large body of information generated, the potential resource implications on the municipality, and the impacts that might be felt by different segments of the community, depending on how the issue is dealt with moving forward. As the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole begins deliberations on this matter, administration have prepared a sequence of decisions which provides a structured process for decision-making, one where issues are considered in a strategic sequence and where the results of the initial decisions shape the decisions that follow. The proposed sequence of decisions includes 4 steps. The first step involves determining if a departure from the status quo with regards to private woodlots is desired by the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole. The second step involves determining which woodlot preservation tools the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole supports for further investigation and consideration, and which instruments might be excluded from further consideration. The third step involves asking the committee to investigate and determine the parameters of the woodlot preservation tools of interest. And the fourth and final step in this decision sequence involves the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole developing recommendations for council based on the results of its deliberations during the previous steps. Each of these points is further expanded upon in the next slide here. So we're going to start from the top and make our way down. The decision tree shown here provides a more detailed view of the sequence of decisions. Step 1 asks, is a departure from the status quo or the current trajectory regarding woodlots on private properties desired by the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole? Step 2 is only looked at if the committee answers yes to the first question. Step 2 asks, given the committee's expressed desire to depart from the status quo, which of the possible woodlot preservation tools does the committee wish to investigate further? Step 3, right here, is where the committee explores and considers a variety of parameters for each instrument of interest. For the education instrument, this would include looking at the content. So what are the needs for content and would the education instrument or tool be looking to provide information on? The second would be in what format would that educational content be delivered? And the third question, or the third parameter, would be looking at who would be delivering this content. Would it be the municipality, for example, or a partner agency, such as the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority? For the incentive tool, the parameters that would be investigated would include looking at what activities might be incentivized, things like woodlot preservation or enhancement. The second parameter to investigate would be what is the amount of the incentive? And third, what form would the incentive take? For example, is the incentive delivered as a cash payment or as a potential tax break? For the regulation instrument or tool, this would involve the committee looking at what type of size of woodlot or what size of woodlot would serve as the functional unit, which is currently set at 0.2 hectares, in the temporary bylaw. The second question or parameter to investigate would be looking at the kinds of activities that might be exempted or outright prohibited by a bylaw. The third area of investigation, we'd be looking at the kinds of activities that might be evaluated through some form of a permitting process. And then who would be responsible for making decisions on permit applications. Subsequent to that, we would ask whether any conditions might be attached to a permit approval, and if so, what they might be. And then finally, under the regulation instrument, we'd be looking at, or the committee would be looking at, the enforcement regime that might be needed to support a bylaw developed in the manner the committee might deem to be appropriate, including things like fine structure and enforcement resources. Step 3 would also involve looking at what is currently being delivered in the community and by whom, so that any additional action that is taken in any of these potential courses of action might add additional value, avoid duplication, leverage partnerships, and allow for the pooling of resources. Now, with regards to step 4, the results of the previous 3 steps would then form the basis of a recommendation to council from this committee on the matter of the preservation of woodlots located on private properties. It should be noted that the structure of this decision process, as Ryan previously mentioned, matches the structure of the online community engagement process undertaken in 2021. I note this alignment along with the body of previously gathered public input, as this might serve the committee's deliberations insofar as some public input exists for each of the decision points in the tree. The report titled 2021 Woodlot Public Engagement Survey and Analysis of Survey Results provided at the December 13th Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole meeting might be useful in this regards, as it provides a segmented analysis of the survey results between residents whose properties feature woodlots on them and residents that do not have woodlots. So in the following slides, I'm just going to go over in a bit more detail each of the steps. So the first point of deliberation, as I previously mentioned, would be to determine if a departure from the status quo with regards to private woodlot preservation is desired by the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole. This question essentially asks if the community's current trajectory with regards to woodlots on private properties is acceptable to the committee. If a departure from the status quo is desirable to the committee, this would signal that the committee desires some form of change or additional action to influence the community's trajectory with regards to privately owned woodlots, and the committee would consider the remaining items in the sequence of decisions. Alternatively, if a departure from the status quo is not desirable to this committee, this would signal that the committee does not support additional action, and this determination would in essence conclude the committee's mandate on woodlots located on private properties outlines in this committee's terms of reference. A few quick notes on step 1. It should be noted that a departure from the status quo might include anything from a slight enhancement of existing programs to the introduction of new woodlot preservation tools, and that any decision in this regard would be made by the committee as it proceeds through the sequence of decisions. With regards to the second step in the sequence, the second main item asks the committee to determine which woodlot preservation tools the committee wishes to investigate and consider further, and which to include or exclude, from further consideration. The tools selected for further scrutiny would be carried forward and further explored as part of the third step in the sequence of decisions. It is proposed that the committee proceed by considering each tool in a separate vote, and that those tools which receive majority support would be included for further investigation. Just a couple of notes on step 2. It should be noted that, again, that there exists a wide spectrum of possible configurations for each tool. It should also be noted that at this point, the committee would only be selecting which tools to investigate in more detail and not making a definitive selection on which tools that will be implemented in the future. It is acknowledged that further investigation might reveal aspects that render a given tool unfavorable to the committee, at which point it might make a decision to elect to strike that tool. The direction the committee provides under step 2 will be helpful to administration, as it will enable staff to focus our efforts on the instruments that the committee wishes to investigate further. Step 3, the third step in the sequence of decisions asks the committee to explore, investigate, and deliberate on the various parameters of each tool of interest carried forward from step 2. These parameters are outlined in slide 7, as previously discussed. And as has been mentioned a few times now, each tool might be structured in a wide variety of ways, and it is important that these possible configurations be explored and deliberated on by the committee so that each tool is designed in reflection of the committee's collective intent. In order to assist the committee in this step, or with this step, staff will develop a model of each tool of interest that will be informed by best management practices and the variety of community input received to date. The model will also clearly show possible alternative configurations so that the committee might proceed through this step with an understanding of the options that exist for each parameter. Step 4, a recommendation to council. The fourth and final step in the sequence of decision asks the committee to develop recommendations to council that are reflective of the results of the committee's deliberations on the previous step and include whichever woodlot preservation tools are supported by the committee and configured in the manner that the committee deems to be appropriate. Administration is prepared to support the committee with whatever may be useful to assist in the development of these recommendations. In the last few minutes here, I'm just going to talk about that it's, as administration feels that it is important to note that the committee retains full control of the trajectory over the deliberative process on privately owned woodlots. Course corrections are absolutely the prerogative of the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole. No decision is final without a recommendation from the committee and an approval by council. Administration stands ready to support the committee deliberations with information, research, analysis, and anything else the committee might need to move this process forward. The committee retains the prerogative to proceed at its own pace. Staff will be diligent in getting as much information as quickly as possible upon request to support the committee's work on this important topic. So with that, I or anyone else of my colleagues in administration will be happy to answer any questions that members of the committee might have before we turn to our committee chair to lead the committee through the first steps of the sequence of decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Gabriel. Yeah, we're going to jump right into our speakers list here, and I have Councillor Thompson first, followed by Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Sakachi. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to move a motion that the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole depart from the status quo approach concerning privately owned woodlots in Chatham-Kent, and that the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole continue to work toward a more defined approach moving forward and further consider step 2 in the decision tree provided and presented by staff, and that community consultation involving stakeholders continue during the drafting of any proposed changes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. I should have said that for the motion, and I believe I have a seconder, Councillor Kirkwood White. Will you second that motion?
I will, Mr. Chair, and I have a couple of comments as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will move to Councillor Thompson for comments.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been a lot of work done over the past weeks and months in regards to information gathering, some community consultation off of the top, and just a ton of information presented to us as a committee. And I think it's important that we take this step right here, this decision, because we need to decide what we want to do. I think we've gathered a lot of information. There has been some community consultation. However, we haven't really had a chance to present anything to the community because we haven't made any decisions as a committee. And speaking to members of the committee, as well as members of the community, rather, it feels like we're at a point where we need to decide what we want to do. Do we want to continue down this path, or do we just say, you know what, we've got the information, thank you very much, and we're comfortable with where we're at. So there's been some frustration that we haven't seemed to be moving forward at all. And I think we're at a juncture where we can decide that now. So I think the presentation this evening and the reports that have been put in front of us really help us to decide what exactly we want to do. I think there's a lot of conversations still to be had, but I think before we have that conversation, we need to make a first decision. That way, if we do decide to go forward, we will have something to take to the community for consultation, and we won't get caught in a Mobius strip of just going around and around as we gather information and not make decisions. So that was the point of the motion, just to get us started off in a direction, if that's what we decide to do.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I will go to Councillor Kirkwood-White since she seconded it, the motion. So I'll go to Councillor Kirkwood-White, followed by Councillor B. McGregor and Councillor Sakachi. So Councillor Kirkwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have heard from many constituents in this term of office, but on this issue more than any other, people with varying viewpoints want to be involved in action planning and sharing of data, however technical and dry it may be. It has been suggested that we sit down face to face with an independent moderator. There has not been sufficient consultation, and I'm wondering whether one of our future meetings, one of the next two, we could do that with the COVID regulations lifting and bring people together so that they have an opportunity to share the data that they so want to share.
Maybe if I can take that first, Councillor Kirkwood-White. We did discuss that. That specifically today. Obviously, I think Councillor Bondi mentioned it in our earlier planning meeting that the news about some of the restrictions being lifted and that possibility becoming more more of a possibility, I guess, with moving forward. So that is something that we discussed. I know I discussed that with Councillor Thompson, the vice chair of the committee, and with with Ryan and Gabriel and Bruce. I think we'll need to have further discussions about that, and we'll be doing that, outside of this committee level for the council level as well. So I think, but definitely we hear that, and I think that's something that's being considered. Also looking backwards, like since this has started, we've considered other ways about having more consultation in this process. Specifically, as we get to the point. But I think Councillor Thompson really hit it on the head. We need to move forward with some of these items, some of these decisions to have something new to consult on and to discuss in the community. But I'm not, Bruce or Ryan or Gabriel, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I spoke too soon. Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the question of how and where the committee meets, I think that transcends planning. I think that's more a question of to council and through the clerk, I think, on the format of the meeting. So I can't comment on that. With regard to this process, as Gabriel mentioned, administration stands ready to hear from the committee on any types of engagement that that the committee needs to have in order to inform its decision making. Now that said, I think it is the opinion of administration that there is something of detail sort of on the table for consultation. So something that those who are engaging with the committee have something to consider, so that might support some productive and some productive dialogue that progresses this issue. So I think how we do it is another question, and I think when we do it is maybe another important question as well.
Anything further, Councillor Kirkwood-White?
No, that's it. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Sakachi, Pinsino, Wright, McGrail. Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you. Yeah, just briefly, I agree with Councillor Thompson, Councillor Kirkwood-White. I think that it's pretty clear that there's a desire for a departure from the status quo. I think it remains to be seen what exact tools that involves, but I think that it's pretty easy to agree that the community is looking for something different. So I think that I appreciate the motion, and I think we do need to support it, and then continue the work of looking at what tools are going to work best for an ultimate goal of improving the community and providing opportunities to maintain natural heritage. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Pinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that the majority of my comments have been made. So, it's been a lot of information to process. So I just wanted to thank the whole team for all the information. And I do look forward for some further community consultation. So especially involving the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scotchy. Councillor Pinson, followed by Councillor Wright, McGrail, and Latimer. Councillor Pinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm going to have an opposing view here. I like the status quo option, but with that, make enhancements to the heritage strategy that's already in place. It has been working. There's been a ton of acres planted, and I think we could enhance that more so yet. I really wish when we set up this Natural Heritage Committee that it would have involved members from the ag community as well as the tree conservation group. I think it should have involved these groups more so than council members, to be honest, like a certain number of council members, but then involve these, because this is what's going to steer this in the direction it's going to go, and they are the stakeholders. If this passes, we have to make sure the ag community is consulted all the way through this process to make sure that their views and everything else are brought forward. And the incentive programs need to be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinson. Councillor Wright, followed by Councillor McGrail and Latimer. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the same agreement as Steve there. This should be put more onto the farmers, should be more involved because they're the ones with the interest in it, and perhaps the farmers could work with Lower Thames more on tree planting and what they need to do. There needs to be some changes, but it has to be at the farmers first. And the education probably is the best, and the incentives for them. But for right now, it should be the farmers because they're the ones that's invested in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. So as I sit here tonight and I listen and we talk, and this is our third meeting now of the committee, and every meeting, we keep saying and we keep hearing, you haven't consulted us, the landowners. And I can't make a decision tonight in regards to this when we haven't heard from the landowners. We haven't heard from the stakeholders. We've heard, and that's the voices we need to really hear and understand. So we have seen a lot of information and we've seen a lot of stuff go through this, but that's one thing we have not heard. We have not heard the voice of the landowners and the agricultural communities to understand the whole thing. And the only way we've heard this is through deputations. So I think we are flawed. I agree with Councillor Kirkwood White that there needs to be a mediator and more stuff needs to be understood and asked. But with that saying, time is running short because it is coming into the season and we're going to start, March, start getting in those fields and we've lost that time. So at this point, great information, but again, I'm going to say we have not reached out to the people that we need to reach out to. And that's so vital in all of this, because if we're going to change someone's land, they absolutely have a right to have a say in what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McGrail. Councillor Latimer, followed by Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Falk.
I too cannot support this tonight. I don't agree that we have to remain with completely status quo. I agree with Councillor Kirkwood White that a mediator would be a great idea. I agree with Councillor Pinsino that the natural heritage implementation strategy framework is there. It's been successful. There's no doubt about that. But the threat of legislation doesn't sit well with me, because there's science-based data that you've provided to us that supports or states that the most internationally productive non-irrigated land or acreage should have extended tree cover. And legislation does not ensure compliance. And while this motion tonight does not state that we are enacting legislation, it doesn't state either that we are involving the woodlot owners or the landowners, which I agree with Councillor McGrail and every one of the preceding speakers is absolutely essential. But what it does, it just continues to put the backup of those very stakeholders that we need assistance from to maintain our current natural heritage features and encourage continued investment in all the best practices and wetland acreage and buy-in that we need. So, as I say, I can't support this as worded tonight, but certainly do support working in the same framework we have been working with the addition that we support all efforts to assist any Chatham-Kent resident to apply and access for provincial funding for incentives, and we continue with the education. We consider some other alternatives or incentives with regard to zoning, et cetera, and that we continue to receive ongoing or be part of this process of the consultation with those essential stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Foss.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just have a clarifying question for Dave, because as I understood from the presentation, the kind of step 1, step 2, step 3 started with a very broad question, and I want to make sure that we are dealing through this motion with step 1, which was kind of broadly exploring departing from status quo, which could be education, further consultation and discussion on various issues, further consultation on incentives, potentially consultation on regulation, like that whole spectrum. Can you confirm that just for us, Dave? Because I think I just want to be sure that I know what I'm voting on here.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, through the chair and to you. That is correct. This first question, step 1 in the proposed sequence of decisions, broadly asks if essentially if is the committee interested in taking no further action, or and that would constitute maintaining the course. It would constitute the status quo. Or alternatively, is exploration of potential enhancements something this committee desires? And if that is the case, as I tried to articulate in the presentation, this could include a whole gamut of potential enhancement ranging from small to large. And it could, the enhancement could fit within the educational bucket only. They could fit within the incentive bucket only. They could fit in the regulation bucket only, or they can fit in any combination thereof. So the question before the committee, I suppose, is no further action warranted? And if so, then then we would answer yes to the status quo. If some type of action is desired on the part of this committee, again, be it a small tweak or the introduction of a new instrument, then the committee would answer no to this question. I hope that helps.
Right. But just in terms of the yes, no, if we feel like even a small tweak is needed, we would be voting yes to this motion, which brings us to step 2, which is where we might talk about those tweaks and further engage in the process.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure I knew which side I needed to, or which button I needed to push in the Zoom call. Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of perspective around what meaningful engagement is. I know that, as a municipal councillor, we all get lots of phone calls and have one-on-one conversations with constituents as we go through, and we make these conversations, and then deputations offer an opportunity for people to further engage with the process. I'm not sure what like a mediated conversation looks like, and if council and council meetings and committee meetings are the right space or place for that. But I think if there is interest in any of my colleagues for further hearing or further having conversations about natural heritage, then you should really be voting yes to this motion, unless we want to kind of fold it all in. Because I would say a no vote to this motion means status quo, we've done all we want to do, and we're going to do nothing. Which, I think there's more conversation to be had. So I just wanted to clarify that in my comments, Mr. Chair, and also, recognize that it's difficult to kind of have some of these conversations in terms of voting yes or voting no. I think the way that this question posed doesn't make anybody choose what side they're on in any sort of way or put a stake in the ground. This is about furthering the discussion and saying we need to do something different. So I'll be supporting this motion, and thanks, Kate, for clarifying that for me and others.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. And just to remember, we are in committee, right? It's just like in budget, we're a committee of council. This isn't like a final decision. We're not voting tonight on the final recommendation that we're going to present to all of us at council, right? So this is a committee decision to keep the process going. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question regarding community consultation. Do we have any idea of how that might look?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's Ryan Jocks, Director of Planning Services. At this point, Councillor, no, we would not. I think that's something we need to hear more from this committee on in some direction as to, things like who or what groups or people would this committee like to engage further, and why the committee would like to engage them, for instance, on what issues specifically within this process would help the committee make decisions going forward, and things of that nature. I support further engagement and consultation. I'm a planner. That's a very big, very, very big part of what we do. I think at this point, one of the concerns I would have, if the committee is just at a question such as the motion that is on the floor, is would more engagement today just be an all-encompassing conversation about the larger issue? And in my view, I think that's been had, and it's been had for several months now. And I think it would be my suggestion and recommendation to move forward in the process a little bit, to provide some clarity on what it is that the engagement's purpose is, and clarity for all groups within the community. Because I wouldn't want to suggest that the consultation that's happened so far, including the survey that many, many people in Chatham-Kent participated in the last year, was not valuable and was not of value already to this committee. So I do want to acknowledge that the amount of consultation that has been done to date, and that it has not yet been reflected in any decisions made by this committee either. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. I guess my concern is that going back into the earlier debates on bylaws regarding tree cutting has sort of got a bit out of hand, I guess. I believe in public consultation, but I think it needs to be done around a table. And I'm not suggesting that we have 300 people at that table, but that we have a sector of each interest group coming and having a mediator come and sort of guide us through a mediation process. I think it would be very beneficial, and I would think it would satisfy each interest group to have their cases heard in a calm and civilized manner, and that we hear, the comments from each group in a positive way. So I will be supporting this motion, but under the understanding that a civilized, organized community consultation take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foss. And seeing no other questions, I'll to kind of do a last call before I'm going to make a couple comments and before I pass it back over to Vice Chair Thompson for final comments. So seeing no other questions, just a couple comments to this. Absolutely, I'm in support of this. I think, when I first read Gabe's report and looked at his presentation, I looked at it, this step one, and then in some of the meetings and stuff leading up to the preparation for the meeting as well, I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of a redundant question. Like, we wouldn't be here if we didn't want to, explore some of this further. So I think, to me, I think it makes sense to explore this. We've heard a lot of feedback. We've gotten a lot of details. I think it's important, now that this committee, this is a simple decision. I guess it's one decision, but I think it's that first one that this committee needs to make in order to move forward. And then we can move into, that step two of the decision tree that's that's been presented to us by staff. And also, I also appreciate the community consultation piece, added to this motion or included in this motion. That's something that we hear. I appreciate all my colleagues' comments on that tonight, and also what we heard in the deputations as well. So I think that's something that we've taken seriously throughout this entire process. I think we've gotten some good feedback through the public consultation process that's already happened, and I think that's valuable information that this committee can use. But I also agree with Councillor Thompson said it earlier, and I think Ryan just mentioned it recently that we need to move along down this decision tree a little bit so that we can have some new information to present on. So with that, I'll end my comments and I'll push it over to Councillor Thompson for final comments before we vote.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think the motion is actually pretty simple, but it's been misconstrued a little bit. I think you, Mr. Clark, and Mr. Jakes hit the nail on the head. Ultimately, the question is do we want to move forward? We've heard a lot of deputations over the last 3 meetings. We've received a lot of information, and we've done a lot of community consultation on that particular aspect. So if your view, as some of the deputations have said, is that we don't want to move forward, what we have is working, it's right as rain, then vote no. If you think that there are areas that need to be tweaked, that need to be adjusted, that need more community consultation, of that I totally agree 100%, then you should vote yes. I don't think we're done the community consultation by any stretch of the imagination if we decide to move forward. But I do think that if we don't have a framework to start presenting to people, then we're caught in a whirlwind of just asking the same question and getting the same consultation back and forth again and again and again. So we need to have a simple question, yes or no. I think probably there's motions out there tonight about step 2 and beyond and what we want that to look like. But first and foremost, from my perspective, we need to decide for the people that those stakeholders we talk about, do we have the stomach and the interest to work through this, or are we happy with the status quo? That's simply what the motion is saying. If you're happy, vote no, we can wrap it up and we'll all go home and we don't have to commit any more staff time to this. If you think we should, then vote yes. That's basically the crux of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. And with that, we'll put it to vote.
Still waiting for 2 more votes. Okay, all votes are in. Motion passes 10-4.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you to the committee. I will, Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you. And through the chair, I did have a motion regarding step 2. So I believe that's sent off, and it's that the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole supports a further investigation into the education, incentive, and regulation tools regarding private woodlot preservation in Chatham-Kent, and that staff be directed to provide details, options, and recommendations to the Natural Heritage Committee of the Whole for the committee's consideration at a future committee meeting.
And if I get a seconder on that, I think Councillor Harrigan.
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you. Excuse me. Okay, so we'll start things off for comments. Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Harrigan, and we'll start the questions on this motion. Councillor
Sure, thank you. You know, I agree with Councillor Thompson's comments regarding the last motion. And this step 2 is really, there's not finality to it. It's not saying that we're going to only enact education or only enact regulation. It's asking for that next step with regard to information to say, you know, what are the best practices out there for each of these 3 buckets or 3 tools that we have. So we've gathered some community feedback, and I think we've heard that we require more. And I think to get that feedback to be accurate and to be meaningful, there needs to be some information out there as to what the next steps look like. So I think people want to know what those options are, what the recommendations are, what the tools are. And once they know that, they can give maybe more accurate and more concise and more constructive feedback to that process. So I think that when we vote on something like this isn't anyone choosing to absolutely implement these tools. It's saying, yep, we want to see what recommendations are there, what options there are, and get some more information back on these specific tools now that we have a better understanding of the issues. And I think a big component of that is that feedback process. So, you know, certainly appreciate there'll be lots of comments on this. And I think we've done a lot of work so far. There's a lot of work to go. And I think that we owe it to the process to take a hard look at all these 3 options and then make a decision once we have that information back.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a comment too about the importance of people being able to give us feedback on specifics. So to date, we've had lots of information given to us and lots of feedback on the engagement, the approaches, kind of the general, how we should view the maps and information that we see. But really further investigation into these 3 categories of education, incentive, and regulation will give us specific options or programs or initiatives that as a municipality we could take on, and allow people to also give feedback to say, that's a waste of your time. This is something we really want you to explore from stakeholder groups. So I do think that this is important to understand what members of our community think about each of these 3 categories, rather than just kind of having the broad conversation about the Natural Heritage Committee and heritage preservation of woodlots. So I just wanted to make that point out there, that this, I think, actually will lead us to more meaningful conversations with the community going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Pinsino.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councillor Pinsino.
Well, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I assume by this, if you're going to bring recommendations to the committee, that this will be after you've done consultation with the involved parties. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ryan Jocks, Director of Planning. The direction that administration would take from this being supported would be that administration would bring recommended education, incentive, and regulation tools for this committee to consider as soon as the March 21st meeting.
So the So that's going to be before you consult with the public regarding like the ag group, the tree conservation group.
Yes.
Well, what I'm saying is if you're bringing back a bylaw under regulation and you haven't consulted the parties with interest, I don't think that's fair either.
And sorry, would you like to respond to that, Mr. Jocks? Or do you want to touch on we've done public consultation, right? Did you want to touch on maybe some of those details? I know that's been shared with committee at previous meetings.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to the question about, say, bringing back a bylaw, for example, I don't know that it would be something that was drafted in the form of a regulatory bylaw, like something that council would pass. What I think the committee should expect, I guess, as a starting point on March 21st, and again, nothing has been decided on how we will present this, but I'm wondering if it's possible to go back to slide 7 of the presentation that has some information that I'd like to refer to. This one right here. Thank you, Gabriel. So if the committee supports the motion that's been put currently on March 21st, say on the regulation side, staff would bring back a presentation or a report that would look at some of these subcategories under regulation beside number 3. So for instance, we would bring a comparative table on the number of properties in Chatham-Kent that contain woodlots and of different sizes, and say, the committee could see this is how many properties contain woodlots over half of a hectare or over 2 hectares or over 5 hectares, etc. And it would start to inform the committee as to the impact of such a decision through that lens, through simply the number of woodlots, the amount of woodlot coverage, and the amount of property owners, for example. And moving through each of these items, administration would bring sort of a recommended starting point for each of these things. And that would be, those starting points would be informed by a number of different information that's been received. So certainly staff would be considering the results of the woodlot survey from 2021. It would be considering provincial policy and Chatham-Kent's current policies and its official plan. It would be considering best management practices, etc. So there would be justification for the starting point that was chosen and presented at the next committee meeting. And from there, it would be something that this committee could deliberate on. And I think at that point, really consider bringing those specifics out to various groups through some type of engagement that would be yet to be determined if that's what the committee desired. So thanks, Mr. Chair and Councillor Pinson. I hope that provides a little bit of clarity on what would be expected, I guess, over the next month or 2.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pinson. Moving to Councillor Latimer, followed by Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Just a clarification, before you do all the work in those 3 areas, that's what the property owners and the stakeholders want to comment on. They want to comment on where you should place your energies. So, and based on what's already available to us. So that's kind of why, not kind of why, it is why I couldn't support the last motion as written, is because we already do education, no opposition to improved education. And there are already incentives out there that we don't know what the uptake is really on the ones that aren't mandatory, and why people don't pick it up, and why they would or wouldn't pick up our incentives. We certainly don't have any excess money to put toward any incentives. for these landowners. And that leaves regulation, which doesn't ensure compliance. And again, all it does is put the backs up of the very stakeholders that we need, that we are most impacted here. You're placing all the balance of this, the burden on the woodlot owners and no one else in the community. This, whatever we do, we should be putting policies in place that are for everyone, not just the landowners or the woodlot owners. And that's what we're doing here tonight. So I don't understand why we're asking you to do all that information and under all those categories if the community and the stakeholders don't see it as necessary.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To me, this is all the decisions here are being made by our staff. Our people that have the investments got no say. Our other tree people are getting no say on it. It's all staff's decisions here. We're not getting the people to put their facts in without only on their deputations. It's not getting spoken truly here. We need to go back to the tree hugglers, the farmers, the conservation groups. All the groups need to be involved here. Lower Thames isn't even getting a say hardly on it. Like the farmers could work with Lower Thames, the tree people could work with the Lower Thames, and then come back. We got to change what we're doing here because this is all staff's decisions here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. And seeing no other questions, Don Shropshire has a comment. Go ahead, Don.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It's Don Shropshire, the CEO speaking. I couldn't let the last comments go without saying that we are seeking council's direction. To suggest that we're the ones that are making all the decisions, I think is totally inappropriate. We are seeking council's directions and as to how we have to move forward. We presented to you recommendations based on the previous input from council. I understand that there are a number of interest groups that want additional consultation, and that's more than fair. But to say that staff are making all the decisions tonight is absolutely not the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And I agree with that as well. You know, I just remind the committee what a motion that we just passed, this committee, a motion brought forward by our Vice Chair, Councillor Thompson, you know, to depart from the status quo concerning privately owned woodlots. The Natural Heritage Committee of the whole continue to work toward a more defined approach moving forward and further consider step 2 in the decision tree provided by staff. That was a motion that was brought forward by this committee and approved by this committee. And now we have another motion by another committee member that's been put forward. So this is, you know, this is us pushing that forward. This is us giving direction, this committee giving direction to staff to bring us more information. You know, it's that whole, that's exactly what this process is doing. So I agree with Don's comments 100%. Councillor Thompson, followed by Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to echo your comments there, Mr. Chair. I think in conversations, it's fairly clear that it's the committee that's been reticent to take a step forward, any sort of step forward. And I know conversations with our staff prior to these meetings have been about how we don't want this to be staff generated. We don't want this to be staff recommendations or staff driving the bus. And that as a committee, we have to take the wheel on this, whatever that may look like. And we need to make a decision. And it's frustrating because we have to get something out there to discuss before we can have those discussions. Otherwise, we're not having consultation. We're just kicking the can down the road for a while. And I don't know that's politically expedient for us at this stage of the game. But if we come up with a couple of recommendations or something, or give staff direction, Very happy to do that. And then we go out to those groups and consultate on that. What do you think of these ideas? Then we tweak those ideas. Then we adjust those ideas. But we've already gone out with the, hey, what do you think about the broader situation? We've done that consultation. We need to drill down a little bit, and this group needs to take some ownership of what this looks like, if anything at all. So, yeah, education, incentive, and regulation. I was going to ask maybe to separate them out, and at the same time, I think potentially you can't do one without the other. So that's why I decided not to go that route. We need to have more input, clearly, from our stakeholders, but we need to have something to present to them. You don't go to a restaurant and walk in and not look at a menu of options. These are your options. So what are we putting together? What does the community want? And let's hammer that out and move forward on this issue. Otherwise, we're just stuck in the circling the bowl, as it were. And I don't want to do that anymore. For better or for worse, I want to make some sort of decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Sakachi, followed by Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my only question would be is that we just passed a motion that basically states that status quo isn't something, the direction we want to go any longer. And now we have another motion up that's basically kind of speaking to what I thought was kind of going to be discussed in the very first motion in regards to further consultation and, and basically coming back with ideas. So is this just, this kind of seems like the same motion, except it's just a little, the words have altered a bit. This was my anticipation when we passed the first one, that we were going to look at what we're going to do. We're going to present some options. We're going to have the consultation around those options. But I think that, a couple of the words that Councillor Thompson just indicated, those are the ones that are going to get, going to create some more, hecticness around the community in regards to, what we're doing or how fast we're doing it. So I guess I'm just looking for clarification from, the mover, in regards to what would this look like differently than what Councillor Thompson put forth, because I thought that that's what kind of, this is what we'd be receiving.
Councillor B. McGregor, did you want to respond to that?
Sure, absolutely. So through Gabe's presentation, when we were looking at those different decision points, he brought up that decision one was, do we do nothing or do we do something? And so I think the last motion just said, well, we'd like to do something. And then this motion is just saying, well, there's three options we've talked about: education, incentive, regulation. Do we want more information on each of those options? That's not putting anything in stone. That's not, saying that we're absolutely going to do any one of those things, but let's find some specifics on those particular tools. So it's really just asking for information on those three tools back as part of that ongoing process. So I think if we just stop with that first motion, it says we want to do something, but it has no direction over what we'd like to do. So really, I was just following with this motion, that decision chain that Gabe had put out for the strategy of going through this process. So it's really just saying, give us some more information back on three tools. And as we do that, that's going to open up that opportunity for people to say, okay, these are the aspects of education we think are going to be helpful. Here's some that aren't. Here's why incentives have worked. Here's where they could be better. Here's how we could do better. Here's our concerns with regulation, or here's where we think it can be effective. So it's not, I don't think it's repeating anything we've done in the past. It's really just asking for more specifics. And I think it's, as Councillor Thompson said, it's a lot easier to engage when we have some things to put our teeth into and we have those specifics. So that's the intent of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. I guess my only comment would be, in the wording that the Natural Heritage Committee of the whole supports a further investigation to the three. I guess to Gabriel, my hope is during this whole time is that we're going to be able to find kind of, I know it's going to be challenging, but maybe, a creative approach and some common ground between the two. So is there also going to be, is there going to be any recommendations coming from yourself that may be a creative approach or a collaborative approach to to kind of tackling this, not limited to just education, incentive, and regulation?
Through the chair and to the councillor, that's an interesting question. I can, when I can refer to a conversation to try to contextualize why these three kind of instruments are before this committee and why they exist in this framework at this point. When I was a summer student in 2011, taking my first steps in municipal government, I was asked to develop a plan, and the CAO at the time said, if you're looking to affect change in the community, there's three ways you can do so. You can enlighten through education, you can encourage through incentives, and you can dictate or tell through regulation. And that really kind of, spans the gamut of what a municipality might be able to do if we're going to affect change in any area. And in this case, woodlots located on private property. We might be able to, work with community partners such as the Lower Thames Valley Conservation Authority, our farmer groups, and our environmental groups to disseminate more information, to quote unquote, enlighten folks. We might be able to look at how we might be able to supplement or add additional kind of encouragement through some form of incentive program. And then the third tool at our disposal is the regulatory one. The creativity, I suppose, that you mentioned might happen, may occur, may materialize when we consider the interrelationships and the potential complementarity that exists between these three types of instruments, right? So there might be a way, and I think there is a way, that we might be able to arrive as a community to help each of these, instruments support obtaining a goal in a way that is more optimal than if any of these instruments are used on their own, both in terms of the effects on the goal as well as the effects on various groups in the community. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Gabriel. I appreciate it. And I guess my last comment is just going to be that whether you be on the environmental side, whether you be on the agricultural side, or whether you be somewhat in the middle, like someone like myself, the bottom line is that we all need each other for something for this to work and to work properly, and we need to work together, or things are going to become even more convoluted. I just feel that we have some very, very smart people on staff, with yourself, with Mr. McAllister, with Ryan, and we have some very smart people in the environmental environmental aspects, as well as in the agriculture community. And I really feel that from a collaborative approach, that we can find some common ground to move ahead. Chatham-Kent is very unique, obviously, with the type of the type of land that we offer here, and I really think that we can work together, and I really hope that out of the education, incentive, and regulation, that that we can find some common grounds to move forward, without it being just cut and dry. This is how it is. So I appreciate your comments. I just feel that that if we would have had maybe a committee of key members of the community, and it wasn't so much us making the decisions, that we might have been in a farther farther along. But I do greatly appreciate all the hard work staff has done. I know it's a very, very challenging topic. I know it's a very heated conversation at times, and I do respect all the hard work you guys have done. And I know, Gabriel, you've been an asset to our community from all the knowledge that you bring forth. It's just that my concern is that we're just limiting it to three different avenues that are going to come down from recommendations, and that's just kind of my point. And I greatly appreciate everyone's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scotchy. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, at what point will we be doing public consultation in regards to this motion?
Thank you, Mr.
Ryan?
Oh. Yeah, are you asking public consultation on this motion on the floor currently, Councillor?
Well, the results of this motion, I guess. Like,
that would be at the direction of this committee at some point in the future. That'd be for this committee to decide. I don't know if Bruce has anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that the information is got, we come back to council, and then before the council meeting, we're going to get all these calls that we got this past time in regards to not being informed. So I'm just trying to avoid some unnecessary outcries from the groups that are concerned with this issue. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Councillor Foss. Bruce, did you want to respond to that as well? I think you were trying to hop in there.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there's a, I guess it's a little bit of a chicken or the egg thing here. I heard that through this whole discussion, right? And I personally feel, Councillor Thompson made the comments that we need to go out with something to, start, continue the dialogue. What I would suggest is that if this is where council wants to go, like we bring back a range of options here. That's what I read into this motion for community consultation and dialogue. We can certainly, I think the next committee posts that, and then maybe, in March, we'll have a better understanding of what we can and cannot do from a consultation perspective, or before that, right? I think that's where we're all kind of struggling a little bit right now. And, going through all this through COVID, and how best to accomplish that and in the type of consultation you want to undertake. To your point earlier, it could be more manageable if we have certain spokespersons for various interest groups in terms of moving this dialogue forward versus a big meeting at the Bradley Center, right? With you could do it various ways. So to get back to your question, I almost think we need to put something out there. Come back to council with a bunch of options. I think we know that. And certainly if we miss some things, we can then say, well, tell us what we've missed in terms of this, right? Or what do you think is better? And get that direction on, some of these various tools going forward. So that would be my suggestion to the committee. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't be having further consultations, just what stage of the game is it the best time to do so? Mm-hmm.
Just as a suggestion, I guess, when the information is ready to be presented, could it be presented to a group of stakeholders and the committee at the same time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's, I guess it could be done that way. I think we'll look for that direction. I guess if it's at the committee, if you're doing it through the committee level, it's going to be another public meeting format, obviously, like this is. So I think we're bound to, post some of this information like we have been to date, right? So,
yeah, I think if we can include the interest groups as much as the committee, probably will go a long way in building and maintaining good relationships. I guess that's what I'm looking at. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Foss. And we have had discussions about that as our, I know Councillor Thompson and I and staff, we've talked about this and we've considered that. So I think, we have had those conversations, and Bruce makes a good point too with, and as we've all kind of seen, trying to get work done through COVID has been challenging. But, given with the news today, maybe there's a glimmer of opportunity there that we might be able to capitalize on, but I don't want to say details of it because it's just so new and it's so dynamic, I guess, right? So, but thanks for those questions, Councillor Foss. I see that Councillor Latimer has a question. I just want to make sure, I know that's the second time, Councillor Latimer, that you've been through. Just want to make sure there's anyone that hasn't had the chance to ask any questions at this point. give the opportunity to. Okay, seeing none. Councillor Latimer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, for that consideration. I totally agree with Councillor Foss. I think it's really important that when this comes back to us, that we have, we know that those main stakeholders have had an opportunity to look at your recommendations, and I want to hear what they think, because I think that's very, very important for us to have, for us to consider what direction we go from here. Thank you again for the second, the opportunity to speak again.
You're welcome, Councillor Latimer. So sorry, I'm not on mute. All right. Can't wait till we can all get back together so we don't have to deal with the mute button and stuff, right? Anyway, I'll make a few comments before I pass it back over to the mover, Councillor McGregor. Yeah, fully support this motion. I think this is the prudent thing to do. I believe, you know, these are tools that the education, incentive, and regulation. We've heard previously as a committee that they work well together. So I think at least exploring them all together it makes sense. And that's the prudent thing that we can do as a municipality and as a council, as a committee of council to look at this in its totality in the most prudent way and the most responsible way. So I think fully in support of this, and I think this is a good step forward. I'm happy that we've first made that first decision a little while ago tonight, and then I think this is the second decision that will give a little more clarity and we'll give a little more information that we can take back to the community and have those conversations and get that feedback. So with that, I will pass it to Councillor B. McGregor for final comments.
Thank you, and certainly appreciate the comments on the motion. I think that over the past 7 years, seeing the process of community consultation on a number of topics, there's a couple of areas that are easy to get tripped up. If things are really vague, there's no actionable items, the conversation can get really philosophical and abstract, and we start arguing about things that aren't even related to the topic. So I think without having specifics, it's really hard to have a meaningful conversation or meaningful secondary conversation that gets us to a point of action. And I think conversely, if you're too hyper specific and come out with recommendations that are a final draft, that's really not respecting community consultation. And there's a lot of other pitfalls in that process. And I think this is a really good middle road to say, let's take a look at all the options from these three tools. Nothing that's set in stone and final. Let's get something out there so we can have a more specific discussion over what we think will work and what we think won't work. And let's actually have some material and some actual items to engage with those groups with, so that they can really tell us what aspects are really, really important, what they think is going to be effective, and where the pitfalls are. And I think you look at something as easy as incentive and say, there's programs out there right now. If the uptake's not great, why isn't it? And what can we do better? And it doesn't say that we have to go out and spend a bunch of money. And it doesn't say, hey, this isn't going to work at all. It says, let's figure out what's working and what's not, engage with it, and then figure out what the action is. So I think that this is the best path forward. And we've heard it from a number of people tonight. Councillor Thompson said it. We've heard it from some staff members that, we need to take a next step. We need to have something to discuss, and this is the way to get there. So I think that this is a really good next step. It's not putting anything in stone. It opens up opportunity for better engagement that we can pursue, and will actually get us moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor B. McGregor. And with that, I will call the question.
All votes are in. Motion passes 12-3.
Oh, thank you, Judy. So we're still on item 10. Is there any other, we've made some good progress tonight. Is there any other questions or anything from the committee on item 10, which is our last item before adjournment? Okay, seeing none. So thank you to the committee and to staff and to everyone that participated in this tonight. I think we made some good progress as a committee tonight. I think we made good decisions, and I'm looking forward to looking forward to getting to work and digging into this more. So thank you, everybody. So with that, I'll pass it to Vice Chair Thompson for adjournment. And if I can get Councillor Harrigan to second it, that'd be great.
That would be great. I don't have anything in front of me, so I would just move to adjourn. Sorry, I feel like Councillor Lack, I don't have the paperwork in front of me.
So adjourn to our next meeting on Monday, March 21st, 2022, after the planning meeting?
Yeah, that's
what you wanted to say? Okay.
That's exactly what I wanted to say.
Perfect. And Councillor Harrigan, you second that? All right. Any questions or concerns with that? Did that make sense? It's on our agenda anyway. So that carries. Or is anybody opposed? No? Okay, that carries. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.